As a mentor, his work had nothing to do with war, so he resolved to live a quiet life, until one day. The man thought about his quiet, peaceful life as he swung his hastily made weapons at a huge orc, already preparing to attack him and bursting into an angry scream. I remembered two human silhouettes, a woman and a man, asking you to forgive them because they could not take him on their journey. A couple walked away, leaving only a long shadow behind them. They said their profession would no longer help in battles. The man said goodbye to Ryu and asked him to stay and keep caring for the animals. The man holds out his hand and asks why they did it, pleading helplessly for them to stop and wait because he can fight them too. He wakes up in bed with his arm outstretched as sunlight fills the room and keeps him awake. Those memories turned out to be a dream. Ryu's house sits among mountains and hills. His farm has many animals that he cares for. The man went outside to feed the animals. After giving the cow fresh mown grass, it nuzzled him, and he stroked the animals' chins in delight. Suddenly a girl called out to Ryu. A girl holding a cat walks up to the man slowly and sincerely thanks him, saying her cat finally recovered thanks to Ryu. When the girl approached, the man stroked the animals' heads. He is glad her pet has finally recovered. The girl notices that although he is a mentor by profession, he can still care for those animals. The guy smiles cheerfully in agreement, but he is actually at a loss because he never really wanted to be a mentor. The church decides professions. Being a mentor makes it much easier to befriend animals. Two of his childhood friends became a young hero and a wizard. Believing a young person can grow into a hero, the girl immediately began studying the path of knights and spending more time training. The magician is a support profession, and its owner was trained in church magic. When we grew up, two friends and I went on a trip. Ryu remembers this and feels he is making little progress compared to his friends, and then a girl holding a cat distracts him again. She is upset because he was lost in thought and did not listen to her at all. When he came to, he apologized to her, said yes, and then asked the guest what they had stopped talking about. The girl tells you there are rumors in the city that his friend will return soon. The man yawns softly, a little tired and deciding it's time for a break, then stands among the trees and stretches, lifting his arms higher. The wind ruffles his obedient hair. Ryu had not expected friends to return like this after such a dream. Ryu realized they had always been together before, but now he was alone. So using his profession, he befriended many dogs, cats, and newscrips, played with them often, and cared for them. The man rests his hand on his head and imagines taming Fenrir. Then he could follow his friends and stay close to them. That dream is impossible to pull off. Suddenly, Ryu is pulled from his dreams by an angry growl in the bushes behind him, and he wonders what made the sound. He is sure no one should be in the forest, so he parts the bushes with his hands and asks whether anyone is there. The man's eyes widened in surprise when he noticed smooth fur, and a wolf in the bushes stared straight at him. Ryu couldn't take his eyes off the beautiful animal, amazed at how incredible the wolf was, and still couldn't believe his eyes when he saw its hind leg caught in a trap. Sharp iron spikes dug painfully into the wolf's hind leg. Ryu moved closer and asked the wolf to stay still so he could help. The wolf did not appreciate the offer of support and began growling at the man. When Ryu reached out, it bit down hard on his hand. Ryu let him try to free his hand from the animal's grip and told him to calm down, holding the ferocious wolf by the scruff as it flailed and resisted, then removed the trap from its hind leg. The wolf watches the man with interest. Ryu asks it to wait while he pulls potions from his bag, and the animal stays patient as he rummages. The man pours a potion on the animal's hind leg and says it will be fine and can run freely and confidently. The man stood up to leave because it was time to go back to work. Ryu barely turned, and the animal was already gone. Grinning, the man went home. The night was dark. There were no lanterns or artificial lights to break the darkness. Only the stars and the moon, reflecting the sun, lit the landscape. Unable to sleep, Ryu lay on his bed wondering if that wolf had managed to find its place and return to its pack, and he considers it a good outcome that he had been beside the animal and able to help. The man yawns softly and covers his mouth, thinking it's time to go to bed because it's late and he needs to get enough sleep. Suddenly, a wolf's foot steps into the room. A wolf appears above the reused head. It opens its mouth and greets the man joyfully. The animal says that tonight is very beautiful, Ryu spins around in fear and stares at the animal, repeating his last words. The other man recognizes it as the wolf he saved that afternoon, and Ryu realizes the same thing and that the animal can speak. Sitting on his bed, the guy thinks it might not be a wolf, but some kind of monster because it can even understand human speech and speak. While the man tried to make sense of things, the monster paced the room and said it had a question for him, and the man replied that he would answer if he could. Surprised, the wolf tells the man he is very honest. Ryu looks away and agrees with the wolf. After all, if anything happens, he will be instantly defeated by the wolf's sharp teeth. The animal tilts its head to the side, and the wolf asks the man to explain why Ryu helped it, despite spending his potion, leaving the man at a loss as he thinks how to respond. After all, he can't claim he only wanted to help, since no one will believe that, and if he lies, he can get by instantly. Suddenly the wolf spoke and asked the man to answer at once, because she was not patient enough to wait for Ryu to gather all her thoughts in a pile. Gathering his courage, he awkwardly admitted that he helped the wolf because he finds her very beautiful. The wolf was surprised by his words, not expecting that reply, and the man said he would not want such a beautiful wolf to disappear like that. The wolf burst into loud laughter, and she realized the man had acted to help her live a long life, so he freed her from the trap. Covering her nose with her paw, she says the man is still very interesting, and that she was only playing with those things a little when he decided to help her. He exhales and looks away, realizing she did not need any help at that moment. The wolf turns back to Ryu, clearly interested. She says she likes him and asks his name. He hesitates. She tells him not to be afraid, and he gives his name. The wolf repeats the man's unusual name, finds it odd, declares he is hers from that moment, and refuses to accept his protest. The man barely caught the wolf's hint and assumed he had misheard her, but the wolf then said he had heard everything correctly. She said that from now on Ryu would be her pet, and the man, taken aback, pointed to himself to confirm she meant him. The wolf suddenly grew so large that her head broke through the ceiling. Wood splinters flew all over the room. She urged Ro to go with her and carried the man in her jaws. The man believes the wolf can speak and grow larger, and that it is a Fenrir. Ryu asks her about it, and she reacts with surprise at what he just noticed. The man asked her to wait a moment so he could grab at least one bag. After a while, they reached the forest. The Fenrir girl said they were in place and threw him to the ground. Ryu remembers rushing through the forest on all their legs, or rather their paws, and it was an unimaginable horror for him because he had to be carried in the animal's mouth the whole way. The man looks up and sees the tree crowns forming a canopy that covers the whole sky, sunlight lighting his wide eyes as he takes in this unusual place for the first time. He was in a small pit beside a hill where one of the Fenrir stood, and identical figures surrounded the hill, watching him with interest. On the hill, he watched Fenrir and Ryu approach carefully, surprised when a pack of Fenrir appeared in front of him. About 20 to 30 Fenrir were in the pack. The one in the middle was much larger than the others. The man thought it was likely the pack leader. Ryu is terrified from head to toe and fears he may never escape the forest alive. Fenrir, the supposed leader, turns to his daughter and asks what kind of person she brought into their home. Ryu realizes the wolf who carried him here in her mouth is the pack leader's daughter. The wolf says she liked him and decided to bring him. The father starts swearing and tells his daughter this is no reason to drag someone into their pack and into the forest. Rudely, the leader confronts the main character and asks him how he knows her daughter. The man says he works on a ranch. The leader repeats the question. Ryu explains the leader's daughter fell into a trap and he only saved her. The Fenrir leader said their people could easily destroy any trap, and Ryu said he only later realized his daughter was just playing with those traps. The leader is clearly unhappy that she's taken up her task again. The daughter turns to her father and says the person she brought works as a mentor. Perhaps Ryu can help their grandfather. The wolf turns to the man again and asks if this is true. The pack leader looks away and says their grandfather lived a long life, and it is unlikely anyone can help him with the problem. Now the daughter whispers to Ryu that her grandfather's health has worsened due to a lack of magical power, and she partly blames herself. He doesn't fully understand, but thinks one of their loved ones isn't leaving, and they brought him here only because he can help in some way. Seeing this, the man turns to the leader. Ryu tells him not to swear so much at his child. Ro asks to be allowed to meet his grandfather. With time running out, the Fenrir have nothing to lose. Suddenly, the leader snaps at the man and, with contempt, orders him to be quiet. The man turns to the leader and says he was brought here to help their kinsman. Ryu's continued, saying that if the problem is age, he is powerless, but if it is something else, he will most likely be able to help. And the leader's daughter looked at the man in surprise. The leader looks down at the man and agrees to his request, letting him approach the elder while saying it would still be a waste of precious time and effort. They arrive at the place where the tree splits at its roots, and on a couch between the roots, a very old representative of the Fenrir rests. His granddaughter greets her grandfather, calling him her elder. Old Fenrir lifts his heavy eyelids and barely manages to ask why a man is here. The girl is about to explain when the man cuts her off with the same hand gesture. Ryu offers my hand to the elder. The elder says he is very pleased to meet you. Ryu says the elder's granddaughter brought him here. As a mentor, he is here to help cure Fenrir's disease. The Fenrir elder gives the man a skeptical look and asks what he does for a living, unsure the man can help. Ryu says it's possible, but he won't do it for free just because of that, and all the Fenrir nearby were stunned, covering their mouths in shock and indignation. On the sidelines, people immediately shouted that a commoner had no right to treat their leader that way. Some even suspected he was trying to trick the Fenrir. The elder stepped closer to the boy and asked whether he could really help him. The guy agreed and looked him over with a searching gaze without him even turning his head to the side. Fenrir agreed and told the man he wished him well. Ryu puts his hand to his chest and says this case will end quickly. In return, Ryu asks Henry for a favor, saying he wants to become even stronger. The elder asks why he needs such power. Ryu explains he is the same as the elder's granddaughter. The man explains the girl relied on him because she could not cure her grandfather, and since it seemed impossible, she sought his help. That's why he no longer wants to disappoint his loved ones, and now he remembers the two friends who left him and his outstretched hand. The Fenrir girl was surprised by the man's words. The elder said he accepted the man's conditions and asked who he was and what he should do. The man says it's simple and starts to take off his glove. Your upper arm is closer to Fenrir. Then he asks me to bite him and drink his blood. The leader called it complete nonsense because he did not believe the blood of a common man could do anything. Agreeing despite the grumbling outside, the elder leaned forward, took the man's hand into his mouth, and bit down. A huge cloud of dust and a bright glow surrounded the two of them, forcing the other Fenrir to cling to the ground to avoid being blown away. The elder's face changed while the boy clung with all his strength. Then the elder let go of the man's hand, and Ryu held her in front of him. He had not expected it to hurt so much, and the girl watched, curious about what the man had done. Still unsure where the mentor's vast magical power comes from, she is curious about it. The man understands what she is thinking. Convinced that Ryu has more magic than the hero, she has reasons, and Ryu shows it by wrapping his arm in a bandage. Ryu's body holds too much magical power, and if it is not released, it could explode. The girl tells the guy he is using too much force and warns that if it does not fall out, it will end badly. Ryu notes that strength usually comes from training, but he was born incredibly strong and grew even stronger with age, making him a real treasure. The girl is distracted by her elder and turns to her grandfather, who is suddenly brimming with strength, while the Fenrir elder waves his tail enthusiastically and looks unrecognizable, and others notice he is already feeling better. The granddaughter steps close and gently touches her grandfather with her crown. The elder recalls the deal with the man and asks him to start training with his pack before he gains the power. Surprised, the man asks if he can really train in the Fenrir forest, when an angry growl from behind warns he cannot, because a human cannot join a pack. The elder sincerely thanks the man for his help, but outside you can still hear other Fenrir complaining that he is weak, that trusting him is dangerous, and that he seems ignorant. Someone from the side offered to get rid of the man. In a menacing voice, the elder ordered all the Fenrir to shut their mouths. Snarling, he doubted his relatives would really face his savior. Everyone suddenly lowered their heads, pressed their ears against the back of their heads, and began to whine plaintively. Ryu felt a terrible pressure and did not know why he was so afraid, since the pressure was not even aimed at the man. Ryu leans toward the girl and asks who her grandfather really is. She tells me he is the very first Fenrir, the ancestor of all Fenrir. The elder asks what the young man wants to do first. The young man replies he first wants to learn to control magical energy better. The elder knows this will demand strength. In this forest, the man must transform his very nature, grow stronger, and learn to master his power. The man takes the leader's words to mean he must face his inner self, but he is not sure he can be with his friends again. The man steels himself and says he will rely on the elder. The elder and the Fenrir girl close their eyes and nod in approval. Without warning, he holds something in his mouth and gives it to the man. A large fang is embedded in the man's arm. The elder proudly says, "This is his fang," and the man can hardly believe his eyes because the treasure he holds is the real fang of the Fenrir elder. The elder says the trophy will help the young man control his magic, and a Fenrir girl quickly joins Ryu, saying she will look after him during training. Ryu grips the fang in her hand, asks others to wait for his friends because he will catch up with them, and wants to become stronger to make that happen. Ryu dodges a quick strike. He trains hard with the evil orcs in the Fenrir forest. The evil orc charges Ryu, drool spraying from its gaping mouth, and Ryu meets it with a confident, determined stare after about a month of training. Ryu feels great when the goblin leaps onto the man and swings his club. Orc attacks are slow and easy to dodge, so Ryu, knowing this, sidesteps the monster's heavy blow. Ryu swings and severs the orc's arm. The creature lets out a piercing, heart-rending scream. Then he strikes its legs because once a monster loses its balance, it can be safely beheaded. The man wipes sweat from his forehead. Proud of a job well done, he turns and asks about the situation with Fenrir's girlfriend. The creature sat on a pile of orcs and yawned sweetly, waiting for Ryu to finish with the monster and noting he had been dealing with an orc for a very long time. He is amazed at how Fenrir handled so many orcs. Fenrir is truly impressive. Fenrir and Ryu made a brief stop among the trees and lit a small fire to roast juicy, delicious meat. Ryu knows orcs are the weakest monsters, but he can already handle them, and Fenrir supports him, saying he seems to have grown stronger. On the first day, the guy only ran away, and Ryu admitted it, saying he can barely cope with such a monster even after a month of training. Ryu built his stamina by running from a pack of Fenrir that kept catching up with him. He also learned how to survive in the forest. A Fenrir girl was always there and followed the training. To develop immunity, he must eat poisonous berries repeatedly. After all, to become stronger, he must be able to adapt to very different conditions. Ryu looks at the fang the elder gave him and realizes he achieved these results because its size lets it be used as a knife. Proudly lifting her chin, the Fenrir girl agreed with the man and said her grandfather is simply amazing. Ryu appreciates that the elder's granddaughter is looking out for him personally. The Fenrir girl lowers her head and pins her ears back, hurt because she still has no name of her own. A monster's name is part of its soul, so naming a monster requires vast magical power. However, in attempting to name his granddaughter, the elder drained all his mana. Ryu patted Fenrir on the head and told her not to be upset. With a bright smile, he said that the elder will definitely reveal his granddaughter's name, and she just needs to wait. The man says he simply can't bear to look at her sad face. The Fenrir girl looked at Ryu with hope in her eyes. A Fenrir suddenly jumps out of the bushes and calls to his mistress, the elder's granddaughter. She asks what happened, and the newcomer says he has a message from the head. Fenrir suddenly turned to Ryu and wrinkled his nose in clear contempt. The elder has news about the man's training, so he must come immediately to hear the leader. Ryu notices the whole pack is treating him very coldly. The elder stands by the tree waiting for the man. Ryu calls out to the old Fenrir and greets him. The leader says the man is quite fast. He says he was clearly told to hurry to listen to the elder, and he smiled while asking others not to pay attention to his colleagues. The elder says many of the Fenrir consider reused training useless, and the man did not quite understand what they meant, so he asked about it. The elder, looking serious, says he's prepared a test for Ryu, who must pass it and prove his strength to join the Fenrir pack. At first, the young man was intimidated by the elder's attack, but after a moment, he put on a determined look and confidently asked what he needed to do to join the pack. The elder's words are grave. Fenrir says Ryu must defeat the demonic rooster alone as a test. The demonic rooster is a B-rank monster. A full party of adventurers can only defeat with great difficulty, and taking it on alone would be sheer madness. Suddenly, the elder's granddaughter steps out from behind the man and asks her grandfather whether she can help you with the task. The elder explains the test requires Ryu to defeat the monster alone, so no one can help him. The elder sees Ryu has not yet grasped the full power of Fenrir's fang, and Ryu looks at his trophy in surprise. Fenrir explains that fangs can destroy everything in their path, even magic. Ryu has the elder Fenrir's fang and will help the man only if he wants help. The elder smiles and says that with that item the demonic cock is no threat to the man, while Ryu scratches the back of his head and doesn't fully understand what Fenrir means. The elder says it is all right that the young man does not understand anything yet. His trial starts at sunset, and he should rest until then. The sun sets behind the mountain. Bright rays on the treetops begin to thin. Suddenly, a monster's foot hits the ground. From behind a bush, the elder's granddaughter and Ryu watch the monster carefully. The demonic rooster is enormous, and mostly resembles a rooster, but it has a large snake instead of a tail and is hunting a harmless animal. Then it flooded the area with blinding light from its eyes. The animal trying to flee the monster squeaked one last time. Then its body, starting with the hind legs, turned completely to stone. The demonic rooster brutally trampled the animal sculpture into a pile of stones and dust. Ryu watches and realizes the situation is bad. A monster can turn a man to stone with a single look. Its rooster-like tail is poisonous. Its only advantages are a narrow field of vision and that it cannot fly. The elder's granddaughter asks the man if he's okay. Ryu refuses her and says he has no other choice. The man stepped over the bushes and moved toward the enemy. Fenrir's granddaughter wished him luck and urged him to be careful. Hiding behind a tree, the man armed himself with the fang of the Fenrir elder so the monster would not notice him. And Ryu realizes attacking the demonic rooster head-on would be foolish, so you need to deal with the snake on its tail first. The man lunged forward, and while the snake wasn't looking, prepared to strike. The snake barely noticed the man before he took it down with a single blow. Ryu is very happy that he managed to defeat part of the monster. Ryu didn't hesitate and sprinted to the monster's paws. Attack them to immobilize the monster quickly. The demonic rooster suddenly screams and swats Ryu away with its paw, and Ryu realizes this will not be so simple. The rooster turns its head side to side, seems to lose sight of Ryu, and the man starts to suspect he is in the monster's blind spot. The man jumps out of the bush and swings to deliver the attack. The rooster slips away from its opponent. Ryu did not understand why it happened until he looked up at the sky. The demonic rooster could fly after all, soaring high and spreading its huge wings. This was completely unexpected, because he was sure the demonic rooster could not fly. Now he realizes he is in the monster's palm. The rooster's wings keep spreading wider. The man will wait until the rooster goes down. Ryu doesn't even get to finish the thought when the demonic rooster snaps its wings shut, sending a crushing blast of wind that hurls him back along with splintered trees. The elder's granddaughter eagerly asks the man if he is okay, and Ryu gets up carefully and says he's fine. The wind proved dangerous, slicing trees into perfectly even pieces, and Ryu began to suspect the demonic rooster had used magic. Faced with a difficult situation, Ryu does not know what to do. The rooster does not seem willing to come down. He realizes having long-range magic would help. Ryu studies the fang with a puzzled look and thinks it must contain something that could bring him closer to victory. Then he suddenly remembers magic. Ryu remembers the elder saying Fenrir fangs can destroy anything in their path, even magic, and the man holds the Fenrir elder's fang. This trophy will definitely help him if he wants it to. He carefully remembers every detail of the demonic rooster's aerial attack. Spreading its wings wide again, the monster launches another attack, and Ryu jumps out immediately, landing directly in front of it and dodging the strikes. Ryu knows that if he does nothing, he will only make ends meet and has no other choice, so he thinks he must try something out. The man plants himself stubbornly and stretches a Fenrir fang out in front of him, light forming around him as the elder's granddaughter notices his mana has increased. Ryu focuses her magic, and he calls for magical power to flow through the fang, and for mana to gather at its tip as the demonic rooster keeps attacking without pause. The mana reached its limit, so it had to be released. Ryu swung his fang, sending a quick shockwave similar to the monster's attacks. A single blow struck the demonic rooster still in midair, defeating it as parts of its body crashed to the ground. He could hardly believe his success as he stared at the monster's remains when the elder's granddaughter stepped out of the bush to congratulate him, sincerely glad he had passed the test. Ryu tried to back up what Fenrir said, but fell to the ground. Fenrir immediately worried something had happened to him. The man no longer had the strength to even stand. Ryu apologizes for the poor reception at Fenrir's and asks the elder's granddaughter to let her rest. The granddaughter is surprised Ryu chose to rest here but does not object and agrees. The man could no longer speak and thought he could finally rest before talking with the elder when a woman's hand touched his head. The eyelids were already closing, but a girl's silhouette was faintly visible through them, and Ryu wondered who she could be since he was the only person there. Thoughts no longer fit in my head and my eyelids grew heavy, and the man was so sleepy that after a moment he fell asleep. Let the girl who was sitting next to you rest. Meanwhile, the elder sat nearby watching the painting and praised the man because he could now safely join their pack. After defeating the demonic rooster, many Fenrir began spending more time with Ryu, with younger children asking him to play and adults inviting him to hunt and bringing all kinds of food. Ryu stretches his arms forward and asks the Fenrir to wait a moment, and the elder's granddaughter appears behind him, noticing how popular he has become with the Fenrir. The man says the pack members won't leave him alone. The elder's granddaughter does not see this as a bad thing because he passed the test and earned their respect. The man recognizes this as a very good alignment of events. However, some people still dislike the pack's new member. A pack leader stood behind the tree and watched you angrily. Suddenly, the pack leader is subdued by his wife, who presses her heavy paw on Fenrir's head and scolds him for setting a bad example for their children. Ryo watches the painting, glad Mother Wolf is nearby, tells the elder's granddaughter her mother is quite ruthless, and the granddaughter says her mother has a higher rank in the pack. The higher position comes from Mom being the Fenrir elder's daughter. Ryu notices his sleeve is torn. His clothes are completely worn out, so he needs to go to the city to buy new ones. The Fenrir girl asks why Ryu doesn't use the monster skins he extracts for clothes. Ryu says he doesn't have the right sewing skills. You need money for new clothes, so you'll have to go to the city anyway. The elder's granddaughter then suggested asking her grandfather about it. Ryo agrees and goes to the elder when the leader, the elder's granddaughter's father, suddenly appears and firmly forbids him to go into the city. The leader believes the man will reveal their lair and warns the elder not to even think of letting him go. The mother notices and is upset that her husband has gone back to his old ways. Ryu sees the leader is right, because if someone finds out the pack's location, they will be in serious danger. You asked the elder if there was any other way into the city, the granddaughter said, to send someone with the man, and the elder agreed that this route would be safe. Suddenly, a Fenrir grandmother turns to her husband and asks whether they lack a suitable candidate in the pack. The girl is delighted to see her grandmother. The elder's wife turns to him and asks whether he truly distrusts the man that much. The elder agrees with the Fenrir grandmother's view and turns to Ryu, offering to introduce him to a dwarf. Dwarves are very skilled and strong, and with the right materials they can sew clothes. The elder knows a dwarf in the kingdom. If Ryu tells the dwarf he is from the Fenrir elder, the dwarf will help him. Ryu smiles and thanks the elder. The Fenrir leader objected to the elder because Ryu would meet many people on the way to the city. The elder smiled and said he would send his daughter with Ryu. Everyone was clearly surprised by the offer. The elder realizes it's time for his granddaughter to see the wider world, trusts you, and has no problem with his partner. Ashamed, the Fenrir girl turned away from Ryu. Her father, the leader, forbade her from going out into the world, especially with Ryu, and as a friend he was slapped on the chin by his wife. The mother asks why there is a problem since Ryu treats her daughter so well, and Grandma stayed on the sidelines, keeping quiet. Ryu paused briefly and considered how much Fenrir liked him. Before leaving, the elder pauses to review. He is going to teach the man some magic, and he can earn money by selling the extracted materials. Ryu was worried at first, but now he's happy and curious about what awaits them on the journey. Grandma Fenrir asks Ro if he remembered everything and took it with him. Ro agrees, and nearby the mother is still calming her husband, the Fenrir leader. The elder taught him much about the materials and the vault's magic, and now he must reach the land of the dwarves. Ryu turns and asks where his companion is. Fenrir's grandmother asks him to wait a moment and says he'll be very surprised. The elder approaches the man and thanks him for waiting. A slender, beautiful girl with wolf ears stands beside the elder, embarrassed as she waits for Ryu's reaction. Stunned, he immediately noticed the girl's beauty and wondered where she had come from. She covered her mouth with her hand and pressed her ears to the back of her head. then asked for his impression of her. Ryu cannot at first grasp how the girl knows him or why her voice sounds so familiar. Ryu guesses who it is, and the girl holds her grandmother's paw, beaming with success, and Grandma praises her granddaughter because now no one recognizes her among people. Ryu remembers seeing a girl after the fight with the demonic rooster and thinks she was the one, and she explains she has been training for a long time. She wanted to travel with Ryu, and at first couldn't keep up the act, but with advice from her mother and grandmother, she managed. Suddenly, the elder appears beside Ryu and asks him to name his granddaughter, leaving him stunned. Ryo asks the elder if he wants the man to sign a contract with his granddaughter. The elder agrees and says he believes the man can do it. The guy must give her a name and sign a contract to make her his familiar, which grants perks like telepathy, so it's a good deal for him. Grandma Fenrir reassures Ryu that there is no reason to worry. Her granddaughter wants it as well. The grandmother continues, saying her granddaughter owes the man money, so she asks him to give her a name, and says they have been together a long time and she can trust him. Besides, my granddaughter doesn't mind either. At that moment, the Fenrir girl bowed her head calmly and waited for his answer. The man agrees to sign a contract with Fenrir. Grandma asks for a round and thanks him for agreeing. Ryu looks at the girl standing directly in front of him as she meets his gaze. The eagle suggests they begin. The girl agrees, and Ryu reaches out to place his palm on her forehead. The man decides he must offer a contract, and she accepts it. Then you must give the familiar a new name. Light pours from the man's hand, revealing every feature of the girl's face. As the magic gathers between them, the man says the name Lear, opens his eyes, and declares he's finished while the girl looks away and repeats her new name. Ryu worried she might not like the name Lear, even though he felt it suited her. Smiling, the girl closes her eyes in pleasure, says she likes her name, and thanks the guy. A sigh of relief escapes him, and he smiles. Grandfather Fenrir steps up from the side. The pack elder asks if everything went well, and the man agrees. Then Lear grabs Ro's hand and asks him to begin the journey. The girl led the man and said goodbye to her grandfather, grandmother, and mother. In the distance, her father took comfort in that small pleasure because his daughter had not said goodbye to him. They began traveling together. Lear saw many beautiful landscapes, was amazed by the mountain views and the barbecue prepared for her, and must have found it very pleasant to fall asleep on the man's shoulder while they sat around the campfire. The girl turns to the man and asks about the dwarf settlement. He explains it sits by the mines and is full of skilled craftsmen where you can find excellent armor and weapons. Along with all the information and explanation about armor and weapons, the man adds that they will arrive soon. A guy friend turns to Lear and asks about something, noting the girl seems to be standing too close to the man. She wrapped her hand around his arm and pressed herself close to him. Ryu recalls that Lear did not stay close to him in the forest. The girl explains she could not do that with all her relatives around. She has long wanted to flirt with a guy like him. Ryo studies the girl for a couple of minutes, then pats her on the head and wonders who could have spoiled her so much. A man steps onto unfamiliar land. A huge wall stands before him and Lear. Lear reaches an incredible height. They arrive at the place. The girl moved forward and asked you to hurry. A man called after her and told her to wait. His wish is for her to turn into a wolf. Lear asks why the man needed that scenario. Ryu shows her a card and explains the girl does not have it. Show your card to everyone at the entrance. In human form, the liar is obvious, but as a wolf, she will be treated as a familiar and the card will not be required. The girl quickly transformed into Fenrir, clearly comfortable in that form, and the man was relieved Lear did not object, so they set off again. A man stood behind someone and asked if this was really the line to enter the city. The band turns and confirms what Ro said. It is a blond man with freckles on his face. He asks Ro if this is his first time here. Ryu agrees, saying he wants to sell monster materials and buy new clothes in this city. The man says the city is perfect for Ro because it has many skilled craftsmen. Suddenly the guards called a new acquaintance to move on. The man bowed, said farewell, and gave his name as Mac. It turned out Mac was a merchant, and they might meet Ryu again. Ryu replies that he is very pleased to meet you. Then a man takes his turn, and a knight sitting in a small window asks why Ryu has come to the city. Ryu hands over his card and explains he was only trying to sell materials to buy new clothes. The knight asks if he is registered with the merchant guild official. Ryu explains he isn't registered with the guild because he intended to sell to the adventurers guild. The guard understands and, as a precaution, asks to inspect the materials Ryu brought. Ryu agrees and lays his materials out in front of the guard. The guard looks surprised and asks Ryu to wait there for a moment. In the distance, the man discusses the product with someone else, then returns to thank you for waiting as a man in aristocratic clothes approaches and introduces himself as a guild employee. A serious man asks Ryu for a chance to talk. And now Ryu sits across from him in a stone room with a fireplace, while the man asks if he can buy these skins. Ryu is taken aback by the request. The man explains that the materials are of excellent quality and hard to find in the market. The man didn't think it was that rare or valuable, and still thinks it's better to show them to the master first. The man, noticing the guy's confusion, asks if the guy is refusing to let him buy the materials, and Ryu insists he did not mean that and was only on his way to a familiar master. A man asks which master the guy is seeing, if it is not a secret. Ryu replies that the master he visited now goes by Dovar Crown, and the guard and the man look ecstatic when they hear the name. The room fell into an awkward silence. The man didn't understand what had happened to them and had already assumed the person was Dovar Crown, some kind of criminal. Ryu asked the man whether the master was really that famous. The man explained that the master had been recommended by a friend and that Ryu had never seen him in person. The man looks regretful, repeats the other man's words, and explains that Dovar Crown is the king of this country. Ryu's face changed abruptly from calm to shocked. He had not expected to hear the title of king given to his master. And now they and Lear were already walking down the road. The wolf suddenly turns to Ryu and asks him telepathically what they should do next. Ryu froze in fear because he had completely forgotten that he and Lear could now communicate telepathically. The man replies that he is considering meeting the king, but it will be difficult. To start, he offers Lear the chance to sell the materials. As they head farther down the road, the main character wonders where the guild is, and they meet a friend. It turned out to be Mac, already waving and greeting them. Ryu stepped closer to Mac and asked if the kid was really waiting for them, and an acquaintance confirmed it, saying he had started to worry because the others had been gone so long. Ryu puts his hand behind his head and apologizes to a new acquaintance, explaining that verifying the material took longer than expected. Ryu asks Mac if he knows where the guild is located. Mac agrees, says he is also interested in the man's materials, and points the way. They ended up in the same place. Mac explains that guilds must constantly report task completions, so they decided to build it closer to the entrance. The room was fairly spacious, with a large counter where employees received a task report. Mac leads the man to the counter. Everything here is divided into 3 stages, he explains. Ryu only wants to sell the materials, so he must go to a different stage. The clerk behind the counter greets Ryu and politely asks to post the materials that the guy wants to sell the tincture. He agrees, deciding it's best to sell materials from weak monsters for now and leave the high-quality materials for the king. He piles all the skins on the table into a large mound. Suddenly, the girl ran off and asked the man to wait, and Mac, who was standing behind you, asked in surprise where he had gotten so much material. Everyone nearby was surprised by the sight. The material was rare and of high quality, and some suspected the man had just shown a trick from the vault. Ryu tried to justify himself by saying it was simply the skin of wild boars, but Matt said it was not that simple. Mac explains that the huge boar is an A-rank monster and mentions wild boars. The main character learned this for the first time because he lived in the forest and did not know him. The girl returns to the counter and apologizes for the man's long wait. She says the guild will offer 62 gold coins for the skins. The man says that money could last a lifetime. Ryo says he will certainly have enough money. The girl bows and thanks the man for the successful deal, then takes a bag of money from the reception desk and pushes it toward him. Stacks of coins glitter brightly and look embarrassingly showy. Max says he's never seen that much money. Adventurers in the area praised Ryu for the successful deal and thought he was cool because that kind of money only comes from aristocrats or S-rank adventurers. Ryu is starting to see that the monsters he defeated were all very powerful. Suddenly, Lear starts a telepathic conversation. She agrees with him that the defeated monsters are very strong, brags that he trained in their forest, and he calms down, wondering why she's so proud. The man takes a bag of money. Now that they have the money, they can go to the king. The travelers hope they will not encounter any problems. A vast stairway of countless steps led to the king. As they reached the castle, a massive arch and a stone wall lined with columns greeted them. The king sits on his throne. A guard rushes up and says there is a problem. The king asks what happened, Geth. The guard immediately drops to one knee and says he has very important news. The guardian immediately reports that a man has recently appeared in the city seeking to meet the king. He looks like a common peasant but carries skins of A-rank monsters. The guard finds this person very suspicious and asks the king what to do. The king was quiet for a moment, then agreed and ordered the stranger brought before him, saying the man would be useful and the guards must not let him leave. Reu and Lear stop to rest. A woman enters the room and hands the man's belongings, saying she has washed everything and mended all the holes. The man takes his clothes, thanks the woman sincerely, and apologizes for having to use her shirt. The woman asks, annoyed, what the man was doing because his clothes were shabby, and she remembers that when he arrived, she thought he was a tramp. Pretending it was a joke, he laughed awkwardly and can't admit he trains in the forest with Fenrir. Lear asks the man in his mind if they will go to the castle today. The man agrees because the guards promised them that yesterday. Yesterday, the guards caught them at the entrance, and now the whole guild knows they plan to go to the king. He steeled himself and is determined to go to the king. Already inside the palace, Ryu stands before huge carved doors. A large arch and a corridor lined with columns lead to them. Guards stand by almost every column. Suddenly, one of the guards says the king is waiting for him. Ryu walks through the room, wondering where the guards came from and why they are here. Ryuji starts to think the king intends to greet them that way. Two guards open the large doors in front of the man and tell him to show more respect. A door stands open before you, bright rays pouring out. A man stands before the king, who sits on the throne. To emphasize the king's status, his throne sits on a raised platform of several steps. The dwarf king looked at him. Ryu realized the king was very strong. From fighting tough monsters, Ryu had learned to sense power. By the king's strength, he matched top-rank monsters. He remembers to act more modestly, kneels, and greets the king. Ryu introduces himself as a mentor. The king says his people reported that the man had come to the city to sell materials and buy clothes. The man agrees and points to his product. He tries to continue, but the king interrupts and demands an answer. With a stern look, the king asks whether he stole this leather. The man was caught off guard by the question. He refused, saying he had taken the skin while hunting. Ryu wondered what had gone wrong to make the king suspect theft. The king thought for a moment. He takes a closer look and says that even from here he can tell these are excellent materials. He asks you if you got them by hunting in the great forest, saying he is only a mentor. The king tells him to stop talking nonsense because a dangerous Fenrir lives in that forest. Slightly confused by the king's words, the man thinks the king doesn't know Granny, and Ryu decides it's best to keep quiet about it for now. The man apologizes and says he came to the king with a request on a friend's recommendation. The king asks who this acquaintance is and clarifies the man's question, and Ryu says the friend has no name and is an ordinary huntress. The king turns away, refusing to believe the guy, while Lear tells him telepathically that the eagle is rude. Ryu says the wolf must calm down and the guy senses something is wrong. Grandma said they had known the king for a long time, but he did not seem to remember her, and there were many armed soldiers nearby, so the king is absolutely sure the man is lying to his face. Ryu suggests asking the king directly, and the king strokes his beard, agrees, and offers to discuss all the terms and provide equipment for him. As payment, the man must leave the skins behind him. The king wanted to say more about the skins, but the man rose from his knees and told the king he did not agree to those conditions. The king wrinkled his nose and did not trust the man's behavior. He shouts, certain he will refuse to give the king the skin. The king sneered and asked what it meant. Ryu says he cannot trust the king, bids him farewell, refuses any deal with a man of his status, and then a guard suddenly attacks the man. You finally became convinced it was not worth telling the king anything. The old man flinched from the tension and then shouted loudly that the man was insolent. The king ordered the capture of the man and the liar. Immediately, the guards surrounded the travelers with spears. Lear says she can do something about it. Ryu strictly forbade it because if they attack the king, the guards will not tolerate it. The king asks the man if he intends to resist, and Ryu explains that with this arrangement the man cannot defeat the force. So the king grins, realizes the man chose wisely, and orders him taken to the dungeon. The guard orders the man inside and pushes him forward. Ryu and Lear ended up in a dungeon. Ryu rubs the back of his head and complains that all his skin was taken. Lear looks at the man reproachfully and says they should have fought back then. The man tells the woman that in that case, they would have made many enemies and been driven out of the country. The king could also turn against the elder. Now Lear sees how serious the situation is. Fortunately for the man, the Fang stayed with him. The soldiers did not search him, only he was distracted by a man behind him. Ryu was so scared he felt his soul sink into his heels. The man behind him asks the prisoner what he was imprisoned for, and Ryu is surprised to find another person in the cell because the man sat so quietly he went unnoticed. The man explains he refused to sell the skin to the king. The dwarf in Hales realizes this reason is not significant at all. Ryu wonders why a man is here. The men look grave and speak one word: treason. In short, the man tried to stop the king from hunting monsters in the great forest. Even if they gathered every head in the kingdom, they could not defeat Fenrir. Reo now understands everything. That's why the king wanted his skin so badly, but it is still unwise to imprison them for such a thing. Ro says aloud that the king turned out to be quite short-tempered. The guy assumes that because the man knows the elder, the man must be an amazing dwarf, but the man says their king planted the guy and Ryu does not hide his surprise. Afterward, the dwarf says this is their king's younger brother, who is named Dwarf. Reo was shocked to learn that Dwarf had gathered his trusted soldiers and taken the throne, and because he resembled the king so closely, no one noticed the substitution. When the dwarf heard about the plan to attack the great forest, he understood immediately. Ryu asks where the real king is now, and the dwarf explains he is in solitary confinement. Unlike them, the real king is locked behind a huge iron door, and a curse on the room keeps him from leaving. The curse is severe. The man now realizes the elder was referring to his older brother. I must get my older brother out and tell him everything. Reo says he understands everything and asks Lear to go with him, thanking her for her help. Surprised, the man asks whether the main character really wants to escape, arguing it's impossible, and even a dwarf couldn't break these bars, as the guy confidently walks up to them with Lear and insists nothing is impossible for them. He swings with all his strength and hits the iron bars with Fenrir's fang, breaking them into pieces, and the dwarf sitting against the wall is shocked to see a stranger in a wolf pelt standing before him. The man asks who they are. Ryu offers a hand to the dwarf, introduces himself as a mentor, and says the wolf beside him is his familiar. The dwarf understands everything and accepts Ryu's help. They walk down the corridor. Only pieces of iron bars remain in their place. It seems they are in place. A man peeks around the corner. Only 2 guards stand at the cursed iron door. The dwarf asks whether the man can really help their king. Ryu says he has business with their real king and will certainly help them. Cautiously, Ryu asks the dwarf if he can fight. The dwarf proudly declares he is a warrior, but he must first get a weapon. The man steps out of the corner smiling and says they will go ahead and the dwarf will have to cover them. The guard had only just woken when 2 silhouettes hurtled toward him. Suddenly, the guards began shouting that they were not allowed here, and the man ignored their shouts, mentally asking Lear not to remove the guards. Lear must try to knock them out without doing serious harm. He follows the men's instructions and begins to act. A guard swung his spear, but the protagonist still managed to jump away. Ryu realizes that compared to the Fenrir, the guards move slowly and are easy to read, so he is confident they will win and attacks a guard from behind. A guard swings his sword at the wolf, claiming he will end it with one blow, then finds the blade missing because Lear made the sword vanish and disarmed him. Right then, Ryu steps closer to the guard and says the guard is moving too slowly. The man kicks the guard. The guards were neutralized. Yu shouts again to tell the dwarf they are done. The dwarf approaches the men. He is genuinely surprised the man managed it, since their soldiers are not weaklings. Ryu says he has been training a lot, and the man asks what they will do with the door. Ryu taps her finger on the door. He knows she is strong, so she carries a curse. The curse was made to make escape from the inside impossible, but it does not work on people outside. Ryu takes up the Fenrir Elder's blade again and swings with all his strength, breaking the cursed door into small pieces. The king sits by the wall, looks up at the newcomers, and asks who they are. Ryu steps forward, offers his hand, and says it's nice to meet you. A man gives his name and job, asks whether the dwarf is king of the dwarves Dongvar, and the dwarf confirms and asks how they arrived here. Ryu grins and says his brother helped with this. The king bows his head and apologizes for his stupid brother. Ryu kneels beside him and says the king need not apologize because Ryu has a request for Dovar. Ryo asks the king to craft equipment for him. The king is puzzled and asks why he should. Ro says Fenrir likely recommended the king and praised his skill. The king snapped and said this was impossible since the Fenrir had never contacted a human to ask him to tell the truth. Ryu then asked permission to prove his claim, took the elder Fenrir's fang, and asked Lear to transform into her human form. The girl turns into a human. The king is amazed by the Fenrir's magic. Ryu introduces her as the elder's granddaughter. The man hands the king a fang and asks him to look at it. The king realizes the man is not lying, apologizes for doubting him, and agrees to grant the man's request. The man is deeply grateful that the king agreed to help him. The king says he cannot refuse a friend of Fenrir and, as an apology, asks to be allowed to make something from this fang. Suddenly the king, like a small child, stares at the fangs of the elders of Fenrir and says it will be a legendary weapon and he will create a true masterpiece. A chance like this comes only once in a lifetime, and he will not let anyone else touch the trophy. The king kneels and asks permission to forge a weapon for him. The man is slightly puzzled by the scene because he did not expect such a reception, and since he knows the elder, he will have to ask the king to make him a weapon. Smiling, the man says he depends on the king. The king nods and thanks him for the opportunity. Ryo knows he still must confront the king's brother, and taking back the throne will be harder than it looks. The king reassures the men that the throne is still his and will gather loyal supporters to present proof of Dorf's treason. The man started to leave, but Ryu clenched his fists and asked why they do not overthrow the Lion King. It looks like they are planning a counterattack. Ro and Lear approach another prison room, and a group of dwarves stands to the side watching. Ryu grabs the Fenrir Elder's fang, swings it a few times to cut through the cage's iron bars, then urges the freed dwarves to leave. Ryu steps closer to one of the prisoners and asks whether he is all right, and the dwarf hesitantly agrees. The man turns to the king and asks whether he has freed everyone and whether anyone else needs help, and the king thanks him for freeing all his subordinates. Elated by this turn of events, Ryu is now determined to overthrow the Lion King with his new allies. The king, seeing the man's extreme determination, tells him he does not need to face the Lion King. The king says he ended up here because he let his guard down. The dwarf urges Ryu to let him handle it alone. The king clenches his fist against his chest and sees it as his duty as an older brother to reason with his younger relative. Ryo saw the king's worries and some guilt, agreed with Mr. Dovar and asked him to be careful. The king told the man that if the man and Lear turned left, they would find a hidden passage leading outside. Once Mr. Dovar finishes his business, he will contact Ryu. After the conversation with the man, the king decided to boost his followers' morale. Mr. Dovar raised his hand and urged his associates to restore the throne to its rightful ruler. Ryu just stood and stared after the crowd as it stormed away. The man suggested that Lear return to the hotel. The woman agreed. The group follows the path Mr. Dovar described. One of them says they need to turn left. Then Lear notices something strange. The girl turns her head from side to side to better locate the sound. Lear asks Ryu if he heard anything, and Ryu refuses. Lear's ears begin to react again to the faint sound that reached her a few moments ago, and the voice sounded familiar. Ryu grew worried and asked the girl if it might be a monster, but Deer was unsure and pointed to the exact direction of the sound. Ryu walked to the corner, waited a few moments, then jumped out from behind it, holding the elder Fenrir's fang. A baby bird lay on the ground, too weak to stand and clearly near death. The girl wonders how the chick got here. Ryu suggests the chick may have gotten lost because it looks weak. Rue reaches out her hand to check the chick. The chick spots the movement and squeaks loudly, and as it squeals, large flames burst from its beak, nearly striking Ro and Lightyear. The man was really surprised that the chicken could breathe fire, but Lear says this is not surprising because it is not an animal, but a monster. The chicken squeaks unpredictably as flames spout from its beak, and Ryu holds out his palms to calm it, saying he is not its enemy. The chicken squeaked one last time and fell. You were wondering what the problem was. There was no visible external damage. The man picked up the chicken and held it in his arms. Lear assumed he was hungry, because hunger made her weak too. Ryu dug through his pockets for food, then remembered that all their belongings had been confiscated. Ryu tells Lear to take the chicken and keep moving to escape the dungeon, promising the creature something to eat as soon as they get out. The group escaped the dungeon and now sit at a table outside the hotel. Lear and Ryu got food for the chicken, which eagerly ate what they had kindly given him. Ryu grins, noticing that though the chicken is small, it's enough for 3. Lear notices he looks healthy now. Reo agrees with the girl and picks up the chicken while the man holds it forward in his open palms so it can fly off and return home. Rather than flying away, the chicken turns to Ryu and after another squeak begins to caress his palm. Lear notices the chicken has grown attached to the guy. Rue agrees with the girl's observation. Lear asks you if he should sign a contract with the monster. The man tells the woman he did not save the creature for that reason at all. Ryu believes that if the chicken wants to stay close, he will not mind at all, then turns to the chicken and asks whether he wants to sign a contract with him. Lear was clearly displeased by the remark. She gave him a reproachful look, turned away, reminded the man she was following him too, and wondered what the girl was thinking. Without hesitating, he suggests relaxing at the hotel today and visiting King Dovar's palace tomorrow. A sunny morning flooded the room with bright rays that kept the man from sleeping another minute. Ryu wrinkles his nose, not understanding why things feel so hard for him. Something heavy seems to press on his stomach. Ryu sits up and rubs his eyes, thinking Leo might have climbed onto the bed. It turned out that instead of Lyris, a huge bird lay on the bed, keeping Ryu from sleeping peacefully. He stares at the bird in confusion. Even after he realized what was happening, he still could not believe his eyes. Ryu screamed and woke Lear. The girl rubbing her eyes asked why he was screaming. Rewe pointed at the bird, looking a bit hysterical, and told Lear to look. Lear immediately recognizes the bird as the chicken they rescued and tamed in the dungeon yesterday. Ryu confirms this with a girl and asks why the creature has grown so large. Lear says the monster must have grown much stronger. By absorbing magical energy, monsters can evolve. Ryu never suspected such a thing. Lear thought again because such events are very rare, and the girl believes this baby could be someone. Lear did not have time to finish when a loud knock sounded at the door. Soldiers had come for him, and the bird was greatly frightened by the unexpected noise. The bird sprang up and spread its wings in an instant. A few seconds later, she fluttered up and flew quickly out the window. A maid enters the room and urges Ryu to answer because he is already awake. Ryu and Lear only had time to watch the trail left by the flying birds. Ryu is summoned to the king, who is already waiting. Ryu and Lear approach the throne and bow, and the king says he is glad to see Ryu. Ryu asks King Dovar whether he has dealt with his younger brother, and the king agrees, saying it all happened thanks to Ryu. The king wanted Ryu to speak with someone before Ryu began equipping and arming the man. The king spoke harshly to the silhouette standing on the steps to the throne and ordered him to talk to Ryu. The silhouette was the king's younger brother, Dorf, who folded his hands and spoke to Mr. Ryu and Mrs. Leaguer. The king's younger brother suddenly drops to his knees and bows his head before the man, offering a sincere apology. You agree and notice Dorf seems to have become a different person. Then Lear steps out from behind the man and asks Dorf why he decided to pretend to be the king. Dorf, ashamed, began to admit he had always envied his older brother. Dorf's brother is a world-famous master. Everyone in the neighborhood talked about him, and Dorf, the younger brother, wasn't even trusted with materials. The younger brother tells everyone here that he was deeply offended by this arrangement. The dwarf admits that one day he will lure his brother into a trap and put him in a car. By taking the king's place, the younger brother had access to all the country's resources, so the dwarf could get anything he wanted. Dorf explains that Ryu and Lear then appeared, and the king's younger brother, seeing the man's items at a glance, realized Ryu had brought a first-class A-ranked product that could not be found anywhere in the country. Dorf admits that upon learning the man was a mentor, he immediately realized it would be easier to remove materials from reuse. However, as the Lion King remembered, the man refused to sell the materials, and the dwarf realized Ryu had seen through him, and that he had made a terrible mistake because he had lost control. The younger brother bows his head to the man one last time and asks for forgiveness, and you understand everything and forgive Dorf. King Dovar himself joins his younger brother in apology, asks you to forgive his brother, and to hear one request. King Dovar, serious, asked Ryu to let Dorf make equipment for the man. Dorf's younger brother was stunned by the king's proposal. After a moment, Dorf protested to his brother, but Ryu interrupted them. He asks why the king made the request. King Dovar says he can still forge the strongest weapons, but his brother is much better at crafting equipment. The king clenches his fist and vows this will be their redemption. The king's memories linger as the first brother wipes sweat from his brow, tired from the hard work, while another brother examines a small, precious dagger that seems to sparkle in his eyes. They had always done everything together. Then one brother began to pull away and take all the orders for himself, keeping the other from any chance to grow and not seeing how much it would hurt him. He waved goodbye, and Dorf watched him, upset. Now the king and his brother stand with Lear and Ryu in the middle of the corridor, and the king thinks that if he had not done that, they could have avoided this conflict. He failed as an older brother. Dorf tries to reason with his older brother and says this is not true. The king ignores him, vouches for his skills, and asks if Mr. Ryu can meet one of his requests. Then Lear called his name, and he, seeing what she meant, said he relied on the king's younger brother. The king thanks you, but his brother does not understand why he agreed. The gentleman explains he could not refuse the services of two of the country's best craftsmen, and if they produce equipment and weapons of the highest quality, there will be no problems. The king confirms Dorf understood everything, but the younger brother still cannot believe it, because he has done so much harm, and asks his older brother whether everything is really all right. His older brother says he should build the world's best equipment for you if he truly regrets what he did. Also, he has always called himself a great master, and insists on proof by deeds, not on sinking into disgrace. He asks Dorf not to let him down because it would damage his reputation, and to do their job as well as they did in the good old days when they did everything together. The king reaches out his hand. His younger brother shakes it back and tears of joy roll down his face. The dwarf deftly lifts his brother's hand and then says he will of course make the best equipment in this country. Ryu has been watching and listening to their conversation for a while. He says he is glad the brothers have finally reconciled. The king apologizes for making him wait. Once the problems are sorted out, it is time to move on. Sometime later in a small village, Tia says they have not been back here in a long time, and that a crowd of residents will surely gather. The man beside her says she is a hero after all, so it is no wonder everyone loves her. Wanting to meet Ryu as soon as possible, he asks the girl to hurry, because he and Ryu have been friends for years and have not seen each other in a long time. Agreeing with Taiga, she hopes the guy is okay because they want to discuss many things with him. When they get close to the house, they see it has been destroyed. Anyone can go inside and look around the whole house. The two heroes are stunned and don't know what to do, because when they left home, everything was fine. A guard approached, called them heroes, and asked why they were there. The girl tried to tell him about Ryu but couldn't find the words. She only wants to know what happened to Ryu and where he is, so the man tells Tia to calm down and not panic. Then he explains to the guard that their friend's house is here and asks the guard to tell them what happened, since everything seemed fine before he left. The man reports that their friend is missing. They stand in stunned silence, unsure what to say. The news was unexpected. Tia can't understand how he could have disappeared, and Taiga then asks how long he's been gone. He says it had been about 2 months when one night a man heard a loud noise, and when he ran over, the house was already destroyed and he had no time to do anything. The man asks the guard if he has any idea why he was left behind, but the guard has no idea because he cannot read minds, and the man worked hard every day and helped everyone with the cattle, so no one expected him to be missing. With regret, the guard says that when they began searching, they found only scraps of wool in the house, not the fur of a normal animal, and that a monster probably took him. And the girl's face changes instantly. Tia abruptly turns and heads to her horse, saying she will search for the main character. Taiga wants to stop her because they still have a mission. She tells him she will look for you and will not forget the mission, so he has nothing to worry about. Taiga tells her she does not know where to look, yet she does not care and will search for him everywhere, and orders you to wait for her, insisting she will find him and will not let him die. Elsewhere, Ryu suddenly sneezes after mentioning Tia, and Lear beside him wonders if he is ill. The rescue operation has begun. At his anvil, the king's younger brother forges weapons, while the others watch from the sidelines. When everyone in the room sees he failed to melt the material, they sigh in despair. Ryu concludes and explains to him that the material does not melt and suggests he try again. Dorf looks sad and disappointed, saying he has tried to melt it dozens of times with no success, and you realize it will not be easy to melt because the fang is too strong. The dwarf thinks that because this is Fenrir's fang, a flame as powerful as an elder's can melt it. Ryu can't tell whether a flame like that really exists or could be compared to Fenrir's flame. The girl with cat ears remembers something. He asks what they think of the Garta flame, and the hero, standing in disbelief, repeats the same question she just asked. One brother joins the conversation, confused about what she means, and whether she means the legendary bird. Another brother says he heard Nazna can kill dragons, and the elder wonders if these are just children's fairy tales. They weren't sure they had really seen her, and after they suggested using the guard, the girl turned to the man and asked if he still understood what she meant. He explains they found a baby bird in the dungeon and says where it came from, then reacts with surprise that it was a guard while the girl explains his magic made it grow quickly, something ordinary monsters cannot do overnight. Only high-ranking monsters can do that, so she is sure it was hailed. The older brother then asks them where he is, and Ryu tries to explain his location. Dorf concluded he had flown away. The king thought he was probably on the mountain behind the castle. Dorf asked his brother if he was sure, since it had been a long time since he left. He explains there is no other option, and only the guard can produce a powerful flame to melt the fangs. Guilty and unable to leave the castle unattended, the brothers ask Mr. Ryu to go search for him. He reassures them they can rely on him and need not worry. Sometime later, the girl and the guy are in the desert, and although the main character promised the brothers he would find Garrett, Garrett proved hard to find. The man thought he had spoken too presumptuously, and the woman replied that he might be right. When Guard sensed the main character's mana, he should have flown to him immediately because he recognized him, and no one expected he would turn out to be bait. The main character tells her to go look elsewhere because there are many places they haven't visited that might have it. Her ears catch a sound and she asks him to stop because Lear heard voices on the other side. They turn and see the little bird struggling to escape and avoid the monster's mouth while the monster pursues it. The heroes recognize him as Gerard, but the girl notices he is awkwardly flapping his wings and can hardly run. Ryu says he's probably hurt and tells Lear to hurry, and the girl says she understands and they're rushing to help him. The monster lunged toward the little chick and was about to attack, but Lear stopped it just in time. She asks the main character if Garrett is okay. Ryu examines the bird and says he sees no external injuries, but that does not mean Garrett is fully healthy. Returning to the castle, they plan to talk later about the flame needed to melt the fang. After a while, everyone is in the castle. Garrett lies unconscious on a pillow and is regaining strength. Ryu had not expected the bird to be so close, and he was surprised because he had thought the guard would fly much farther away, and Lear suggests the guard might not have parents. The protagonist asks Lear whether she truly thinks that explains why he was alone in the dungeon, rather than for some other reason. And the girl replies that he has nowhere to return to, so he could not have flown far from them. Ryu understands everything. The king enters the room and asks the main character about the guard's condition. He tells him Garrett is fine, just a little tired, so Garrett needs time to rest. You can't be 100% sure you'll help them. The bird begins to wake slowly. He notices. He asks about the guard's condition and says he can rest a little longer. The bird did not expect to see so many people when it woke. She immediately flies to Ryu, perches on his shoulder, and speaks to him in her bird language about something. The main character asks whether he is still afraid of people and urges him not to be. He reassures him, saying it's safe here, and he has nothing to worry about so he can relax. The girl watches them for a while. He then asks whether the main character wants to sign a contract with Gerard. Ru had not expected those words and did not understand why he would do that. Lear says that if they are not around, the bird may get into trouble. In any case, he needs someone he can rely on, so a contract is the best solution. Ryu agrees the contract is a good idea, but wants to let Godard decide for himself. Ryu asks Garda to sign a contract with him because he could really use his strength. If he doesn't want that, he can fly away safely, but still wants to hear his answer. So he asked what he would choose. Everyone there is watching the man and the bird. The bird looks intently at the main character. Flapping its wings, the Garrett lifts off the ground. The man watches closely, a little shocked. The bird perches on his shoulder as if accepting his proposal, and chirps happily to him in its bird language. Ryu can hardly believe it and asks whether he is sure of the decision, and the bird squeaks to confirm it again. Lear praises the man for managing to sign a contract with the legendary bird, because it's so difficult. He thanks her and asks what to call him. Dorf stands nearby, unsure if he wants to contact Garrett. The king, in turn, calls it a rare opportunity and suggests they continue in the city square for the beautiful views. Sometime later, the four of them and Garrett arrived at the square. Ryu can't understand why there are so many people here. Both the guards and the state's residents are shouting the king's name, and the hero asks whether it is all right that so many people have gathered here. The king apologizes to him because his status makes attention unavoidable, and he does not want to draw extra notice. He asks if they should come another day, but Ryu says everything is fine and they should finish as soon as possible, since waiting weeks would only stretch it out by a few more days. Holding the bird in his hand, the main character says he will now name him and sign a contract with him. The man tells the legendary bird he will perform a ritual so they can become a family, and he hopes God agrees. God beeps to show agreement. The protagonist starts the ritual as the bird edges closer to the gun. Ryu smiled at the bird and said his name was now Corinne. The bird closed her eyes at his words. A hurricane appears in their place, made of flames and sweeping away everything in its path. The king doesn't understand what's happening, and Ro is equally at a loss since this has never happened before. But Lear spots something in the hurricane and calls to the man to look where she is pointing. An egg appeared inside the hurricane and hovered in the air with nothing beside it. The group moves closer, unsure whether Karen is here, and Lear says Garrett is probably evolving, which Ro believes only happens to high-ranking monsters. He can't tell if Karen is one. Lear then explains to the protagonist that evolution means gaining a new form and power. Thanks to Ryu's power, she will be able to evolve. The girl wants to know how the guard will look, and they must greet her properly. As the egg began to crack, the main character said Karen was hatching and reached out to protect anyone from falling. You catch a girl with wings just in time and gently set her on the ground. He asks if Karina is okay since she hatched so suddenly, but Garrett only calls him Dad. The main character can't believe he was called that because it surprised him. Karen continues, saying that although much time has passed since they last met, he hasn't changed and is still cool. Although he said they'd be a close family, he didn't expect her to take it so seriously, which is why Corinne calls him Dad. These questions haunted him. Yet Ryu wondered why she had taken human form and why she called him Daddy. Karen replied that she had always been alone. When she was born, there were no parents or friends nearby, and she kept searching for them. As soon as people noticed her, they attacked, so she spent her life running away from them. Now Lear understands why she ran off when she heard soldiers' footsteps approaching. Karen says she saw everything correctly, but that day her father and sister helped her. By that she means you and Lear. It was the first time anyone had shown her such kindness, so she grew fond of them both and chose to take a human form like theirs. The characters exchange looks. Then Ryu approaches Karina and pats her on the head, saying he understood everything, while the king's voice comes through the hurricane, asking if Mr. Ryu is all right and requesting a response. The hero says they are fine, then asks Karen to remove the flame, and she does so at once. Ryu waves his hand to announce their presence, and Dorf notices the men walking in single file. The main character approaches the brothers and says everything went fine, but Dorf does not grasp how significant it is because they caused a real firestorm here. After the younger brother calms down, the king asks who the girl beside him is, and the younger brother introduces her to his brothers as Karen, saying she has chosen to become human. Dorf is taken aback by what he heard because a guard stands before him. while the king is not surprised at all since this is exactly what you would expect from the legendary bird. Ryu asks whether they can handle it with Karen's help and says that with such a force, they will have no problems. Then Ryu said it was time for them to return to the workshop and get to work, and he asked them to calm the townspeople. As they were returning, a feather from Karen fell and lay on the ground. One young man picked him up and examined him quietly, saying he wanted to find out who this Ryu was because he seemed so unusual. 1 month later, Dorf asks the main character to try on his creation while Lear stands beside him, also waiting. The dwarf calls this his masterpiece, a suit of leather armor he crafted himself. Ryu is thrilled and says the armor is incredible and he can hardly believe he created something so remarkable. Dorf says it's all thanks to rare materials. He also added an effect that prevents temperature changes, and the main character does not understand it, so he asks him to explain it more fully. He tells him simply that neither fire nor ice magic will work against armor. For resistance to fire magic, they should thank Corinne. The effect was achieved by adding her feathers to the material. He is confident that protection from cold and heat will be very useful. Ryu's eyes sparkled. Dorf said thanks with delight. Only the sword remains, and the king enters the room to apologize for the delay. He tells him his blade is ready. The main character says the work was worth the wait, and Dorf, surprised, says the blade is made of Fenrir's fang. Ryu asks whether it was meant to be a dagger and notes the blade is sharpened on only one side. The king explains the blade is special, and that he used techniques from the East because one-sided sharpening is said to make it sharper. Corinne, who entered with the king at the same time, says she also helped make this weapon, and Ryu pats her head while praising her. At this point, he says the only thing left is to give the blade a name. The protagonist does not understand why it needs a name. The king explains it is important he be able to make the engraving so everyone knows the blade belongs to him and only he can use it. 127. You did not expect such a request, so nothing came to his mind. But then a brilliant idea came to him. Someone suggests naming the Blade Wolf. The king says the blade will now bear that name, Lear says that was predictable, and Ryu says he does not see the problem. The oldest brother says it's pointless to destroy it and better to test it in a real battle, and the main character agrees. Sometime later, a huge crowd gathered again around Ryu and his comrades in the city center square, and someone in the crowd shouted that apparently a show was planned and people were looking forward to it. The main character is surprised the crowd is so large. The king says regretfully that people have heard about him again. The king assured him not to worry, since they would keep citizens from getting close to him. Ryu said he understood, but would not get carried away to avoid accidentally harming civilians. The king told him to start. All eyes were on the speaker, who announced that the blade made by the king himself was about to be tested, and that the trial would begin immediately. Finally, the king asks him to release all the blade's magic power so the king can gauge its strength. Ryu says he understands and now stands alone in the square. With the citizens watching him, the main character fears that, despite being told not to hold back, his power could hurt them. So he aims his punch at the sky. He swung his sword and everyone watched closely, tracking the strike's path and where it would land. The clouds clear after that blow, leaving everyone stunned, including Ryu. People began to cheer, calling it amazing, saying they never expected to see anything like it, and admiring the main character's incredible strength. Even Ryu himself can hardly believe it. Karen insists her dad is the strongest, and Lear steps closer to him, saying she expected nothing less. The king approaches the hero and explains this is to be expected from Fenrir's fang, since its concentration of magical power is on a completely different level. The king began to talk about everything going his way, but a voice interrupted and told everyone to look up. Everyone looked up as a dragon flew overhead, drawing closer by the second, with someone standing on its back. Ryu stands stunned as a dragon emerges from the clouds and flies straight toward them, several people visible on its back. When the dragon nears the ground, the people on its back jump off. 4 figures face the main character and his companions, all wearing identical uniforms. Standing in front, the man begins the first conversation and says he and Ryu have not seen each other in a long time. The man looks confused and cannot place how he knows him, while Lear brightens on seeing him and calls him Grandpa. Ryu stands stunned for a few seconds, then realizes the man is an elder. The man smiles and tells Ryu that the main character is seeing him in human form for the first time, not as a dragon. The main character notices the people standing behind him are Dad, Mom, and Grandma Lear. Yet he thinks her grandmother looks too young. The woman, seeming to read his mind, asks if he has wondered why she looks so young. The man denies it and says he never thought about that. The king approaches Mr. Fenrir and asks how he is, and Mr. Fenrir says he has no complaints about his health and that everything is pretty good. The king still wonders why they came here. The elder says he only wanted to speak with Ryu. He wants to know something but prefers not to talk about it in front of everyone, so he'll bring it up later when they're alone. Curious about Mr. Fenrir's questions, the main character tells him that a dangerous creature has recently awakened. The Dragon of Evil gave him the name, a massive three-headed creature that could use every kind of magic. He had fought it before but could not defeat it, so the elder had to seal it. Ryu pictured him and said he was a real demon and did not want to deal with him. Mr. Fenrir explained he had recently felt the seal begin to weaken, so I decided to prepare for battle. He will need allies in the battle, so he came to ask Ryu for help. But Ryu can't imagine that or how to fight it. Ryu moves closer to the elder and asks whether you really think he can handle the dragon. The elder laughs and says he also studied in the Great Forest and is now a cut above any human being. The elder asks the main character to be more confident in himself. Ryu says that because the elder told him this, he will follow that advice, Lear. Peeking from behind, the main character says he will also help his grandfather. Ryu asks the elder where the dragon is now, and the elder says it is in the Dragon Empire. The seal lies in a cave near the Imperial Castle, and this time they will all fight together. He will explain the details on the way to the kingdom. Ryu cannot understand how this is possible. A strange sound comes from behind, and when he turns, he sees a huge dragon that seriously frightens him. The dragon told him it was an amusing sight, since he had not expected Fenrir to ask a human for help. Tilting his head, he asked the main character if he was an elder's disciple. Ryu can hardly believe he is talking to the dragon who brought the entire Lear family. And Mr. Fenrir decided to introduce him to the others. It turns out this is his son-in-law, the Earth Dragon. The elder's son-in-law is pleased to meet the main character. The man says he is also very glad to meet them, and Ryu is shocked that the legendary monsters are part of the same family and can understand human speech. People in the square don't understand what's happening and can't believe the main character can talk to a dragon. Fenrir says his son-in-law will take them to the Dragon Empire. Ryu says it's a bit much for him because he's not yet confident in his abilities, and the brothers say they will go and won't miss the chance. Sometime later, everyone flies to the Dragon Empire. The elder sits with them and asks the main character about his new girlfriend. Laughing, he says he is not only Lear, but also Corinne, praises the man, and asks him to pay closer attention so he has the strength to care for both of them, the father who is always around. Here is their conversation with Grandpa Lear, who tells the man he is not a good person. First, Ryu stole his daughter from him, and now he is cheating on her, and warns that he will soon meet his end. The girl's mother hits her husband on the head and tells him to stop talking nonsense. She turns to the protagonist and tells him to ignore it. Her husband missed him a lot. Ryu notices they haven't seen each other in a month. He tells her parents the girl cares deeply about Karen. They always eat and even bathe together, Lear explains, because she takes care of her younger sister. Then Grandpa Lear asks Karen about her parents and whether she thinks they will worry about her. The same child clinging to her older sister's hand says she has no parents, but she has Ryu and Lear. The older sister says everything is fine. Though very young, she is lucky to meet such kind people along the way. He tells Corinne to make sure she knows that if his granddaughter considers her a younger sister, then she is like a daughter to them. At first it feels odd to her, but he invites her to call them family, and the rest of the family smiles at her with affection. Corinne's eyes fill with joy, a smile spreads across her face, and she tells him she understood everything and thanks him. Later they ride an earth dragon, and he tells them they will arrive soon. Ryu looks around and is delighted by the sight of Earth and its beauty. From his vantage point, the whole city stretches out and seems enormous, and the main character can hardly believe his eyes. He leans down slightly to view the area and asks if this is the Dragon Empire. The elder confirms and says the whole city and palace are the Dragon Empire. The dragon joins their conversation and admits he doesn't really like the empire because it's so small. The main character can't understand how it's considered a small country. The dragon said he and the dragonites were good friends, but because the dragonites are as tall as humans, they had to build a palace to human standards. Fortunately, he has transformation magic and can live there in peace. Ryu said it was difficult. Sometime later they arrive at the gate. The earth dragon asks them to pass through. Ro thanks him. A long-haired man appears in front of him, leaning over his face, and the earth dragon, now in human form, says he will show them around, which the main character did not expect so abruptly. They reach the gate, guarded by sentries, greet the master and bow their heads before him, and he thanks the guards for their hard work. The guards ask if the people with him are his friends. The gentleman says, yes, this is Fenrir and his family. One guard cannot believe it and says that with the legendary monsters on their side, victory is assured. The second guard points at Ryu, wonders who he is, and tells the other guard that Ryu is his student. The guards cannot accept that their master's disciple could be human, and worry if he will be all right, saying people are very weak. Ryu dislikes their words but cannot argue because, compared to them, it is true. Father Lear becomes enraged and accuses the guards of calling the student who studied under their elder a weakling. The guard recoils at his menacing presence and says they did not mean that. Ryu wonders why her father is so angry and defends him. The girl says he probably felt people saw them as weak. Angry and determined, Father Lear says he understands everything and that they will prove how strong their student is. As they entered the gate, Father Lear asked them to call his boss, who said Ryu would kill him in 2 seconds. The man had no idea how he ended up in this situation or why others made decisions for him. The boss looks very intimidating. Small horns jut from his forehead, and now they stand apart from everyone to begin their duel. Father Lear, shouting from the crowd, tells the guy he must not even think about losing, and Karen only wishes the main character good luck. All this puts heavy pressure on Ryu, and he does not like it because he did not want to get involved in any fights. The Earth Dragon calls them to him to review the rules of the duel. He asks whether they will agree that if one side cannot continue fighting, that side automatically loses. The boss says he has no objections, and the main character standing before him agrees. The boss tells Ryu that although he is ordinary, he will not hold back and orders him to get ready. The Earth Dragon lowers his hand and says the duel can begin. When the signal to start the flight sounded, the boss attacked without delay. Moving so fast, he came close and already had his sword aimed at the main character's face. But the main character stopped him just in time and, with difficulty, managed to fend off the attack. The boss fell back and waited for a better moment to attack, which came immediately, and soon he was again at the main character's face with his sword in hand. Seeing the boy struggle, he asks what will happen if the boy really plans to face the Black Dragon with such forces. Ryu is overwhelmed by the huge number of attacks, far beyond his strength, and his opponent is both strong and fast, leaving him unable to counterattack. But he can't give up now because his reputation is at stake. He knows he must use the sword technique. Attacking with magic gives him a chance, but he must hold back his strength and strike at the right moment. When their swords touch again, he realizes it is time to use the sword technique. He touches his blade's sharp edge to his opponent's sword. Not expecting any effect from the magical force, he crashes into the wall so hard it leaves a large dent. Everyone watching is shocked by what happened, including Ryu. The protagonist holds the blade carefully because he is not yet used to the wolf's power. The Earth Dragon raises his hand to signal the duel is over and declares Ryu the winner, while the guards watch and rush to their commander, who lies on the floor. Father Lear walks up to the man and praises him, saying he did well. Corinne joins in, happy about her dad's victory. Ryu focuses more on his opponent's condition, turning to the Earth Dragon to ask if he is all right. The man told him nothing terrible had happened because they had agreed to a duel, and Ryu breathed a sigh of relief after his words. Sure, nothing would happen to him after all. The elder approaches the man, puts a hand on his shoulder, and says the main character has become stronger. The Earth Dragon promises to open the Dragon Empire's gates for them, and pushes the doors open with his hands. Everyone froze in anticipation. He opens the gates with a heavy, deliberate motion. He manages it anyway, and a beautiful view opens before them, revealing the Empire's natural beauty. The Earth Dragon leads them past a house where a man stands at a window, his face hidden in shadow, and he says he never thought the soldiers of the dragon army could be defeated so easily because it seemed impossible. He looks forward to meeting the people who just arrived because they have such interesting personalities. The travelers walk along the main street, which is crowded with people. Ryu walks along and straightens the streets, saying it is beautiful here. The Earth Dragon tells him this is the land of dragons, so human lands are very different from this place. Karen stops and studies the store counter, and Ryu and Lear notice her and approach R. When the girl asks what happened, Corinne did not expect anyone to follow her and say everything was fine. Lear looks at the store counter and sees bows on display. Thinking the woman wanted one, she asks if the woman liked the bows. Hearing their conversation, the Earth Dragon says there is still some time before the battle, so they can walk around the city on their own. The protagonist invites them to go shopping and buy whatever they want. The girls immediately accept and are delighted by the offer. Later, the dragon says they must meet the Emperor first. Everyone they pass along the way is working hard and focused on their own business. You noticed there are many different races here, not just dragons, and the Earth Dragon leading the way says you are correct and that dragons treat all races well. Dragonites are half dragon and half human, and after evolving some developed a lizard-like head. The main character wants to hear him out. Curious, he asks what kind of dragon the Emperor is. The dragon says the Emperor is the strongest dragon in the Empire and far stronger than him. The man cannot believe the Emperor's power. The Earth Dragon breaks his train of thought, says he will understand everything as soon as he sees him, and asks him to enter the hall since they are already here and their conversation is over, and the door opens. Before him, the Emperor and Empress sit on the throne. Both appear friendly, and Ryu notices their aura is unlike the others, making it obvious they are the Imperial family. The Earth Dragon bows and greets the Emperor. Both rise from their thrones and step toward the newly arrived travelers. The Emperor greets the Earth Dragon, and the Empress says she did not expect him to find so many allies. A man who can defeat the captain of the guards earns her appreciative look as she says these words. Her face shifts to a slight smile as she says she has never seen people this strong and is counting on the main character. Then the Earth Dragon turns to the man and asks him to respond. The Emperor interrupts and says he wants to discuss tactics with the Fenrir family first. The Empress says rooms have been prepared for them, and the guys look at the Dragon Country rulers in surprise. The elder asks, except with them. What about the others? Hearing the question, the Emperor's expression changes, and he doesn't answer immediately, but still says only they will take part in the battle. Above all, this news shocked Rui. He couldn't believe that only they would take part in the fight. The Emperor looks regretful and says this is true, because they once had friendly relations with other races, but since the hero appeared, they have withdrawn their support. The elder says he understands everything, and the main character stands stunned, trying to take in what he has heard, worried for the small group because there are so few of them. And from the conversation, he remembers the hero. Remembering that Tia has become a hero, he considers asking her for help, but the Earth Dragon says it will not work. The current hero sees every monster as an enemy and attacks even half-humans. The main character cannot believe that Tia is attacking everyone indiscriminately, because he knows her and she is not that kind of person. The head of the Fenrir family realizes they have almost no chance of winning in this situation, and the Emperor apologizes. Now Ro remembered that before their journey, Taiga had mentioned Tia's strange behavior. The hero asks Taiga if Tia has been acting strange lately, and Taiga says that's true, because when they accept a request to fight monsters, her expression changes completely, and even he sometimes gets scared. Ryu can hardly believe what he said because he remembers Tia used to be a real crybaby, and Taiga remembers that too. Still, he asks the main character whether he knows what might have happened to her, but the main character replies that he has no idea. Taiga says maybe a heroic spirit lives in her, which explains her behavior, and it would be good if that is true. It does. Ryu thinks the reason is different and wonders why the girl hates monsters so much. Meanwhile, Tia and Taiga, on a mission and also searching for the main character, cannot understand this absurd request. The man was furious. The king had said that to forge a weapon from the fangs of Fenrir, they needed the guardian flame and instructions to obtain it, and if they gathered all the materials, he would create legendary weapons for them. Tiger says he has heard the country's king is a skilled blacksmith. The man beside him says that's to be expected, and that a powerful weapon needs the right materials. Tia asks to forget the weapon, but the girl behind her asks what the point of their visit is. Priestess Maria says Tia is a hero and always in danger. That night, Gran, who is on the hero's team, joined her and the priestess did too. He agrees with Maria and says she needs a good weapon because she is a hero. Tiger suggests they first go to the guild to look for information about the materials they need. All team members agree. Sometime later, they arrived at the guild and found everyone staring at them oddly. The knight notices this and cannot make sense of what is happening. The people around them stare with suspicion when Fenrir and Garrett are mentioned, and when asked about them, the locals fall silent and say nothing. Tia suggests something bad may have happened in this country. An unknown man in a black robe approaches the team, his face hidden, and asks if they really want to know more about Fenrir and the legendary bird of Garda. The girl asks who he is. The young man is pretending to be an information dealer. He asks why the hero is after Fenrir and Gard. The girl says the king told them they must get Fenrir's fangs and Gard's flame to obtain weapons. Grant approaches an information dealer, says the dealer clearly knows something, and asks the dealer to tell them about it, offering any sum of money, and the merchant refuses payment and asks to hear a story. About a month ago, a man arrived in this country in the company of Fenrir and Garrett, and helped suppress the rebellion led by the king's younger brother. In short, he is now their country's hero. Tia doesn't understand what that means, since she is a hero. The merchant continues and says there are rumors the hero hates monsters, but the hero is friends with Fenrir and Gerardard, which contradicts those rumors, and the merchant fears their hero will just cut down Fenrir and Gerard. The merchant said that if he gave them more information, their hero would kill his allies back home and could return for revenge. So when Maria asked about it, no one wanted to tell them, and the merchant answered vaguely. Taiga asks Tia what is wrong and why she is silent. The girl stands with her back to them and says nothing. Turning around, she said she would handle the hero, then walked to the exit and thanked the informant as Taiga tried to stop her. Determined to destroy every monster, the girl leaves the guild and vows that once this is over, Tia will definitely find Ryu. Meanwhile, Ryu sits at the table with Lear and Karin, lies down on the table from tiredness, and is glad they are finally finished so he can take a break. They made no decisions at the meeting. The Dragon Emperor and the Elder kept discussing battle tactics, so there was nothing for him to do. Lear suggests they walk through the palace. Corinne instantly agrees with the girl's suggestion, and you do not object. Still, the main character thinks you should not wander the palace aimlessly and should warn someone first. Ryu opens the door to leave and finds a maid waiting, which surprises him because he already saw her standing beside the Empress. When the maid asks where he is going, the main character, startled, says they only wanted to explore the palace a little, and the maid studies them with suspicion. She immediately changes her expression, asks them to follow her, and Corinne is very pleased with the outcome. As the characters move forward, the man feels a strange, unexplained sensation. Maybe she stood outside the door and listened while they were in the room. Sometime later, the mage shows them the dining room, the library, and the training area where the knights are training. She leads them to the Imperial Garden. All three are delighted by the beauty, and I can't take my eyes off her. Corinne says the garden looks great. Lear completely agrees. The main character says it is very beautiful here. The maid said she was glad the guests liked it, and the princess really likes it here too. Ryu is unsure which princess she means, so he asks the maid if a princess is here, and the maid says yes, and that the princess is very important to their country, and Ryu says he understands everything, but still has one question. He points at a column with a lock of hair sticking out and asks who is hiding there. A little girl steps out of her hiding place and says he noticed her after all. All three are shocked to see a child standing in front of them. The girl approaches the main character and stares at him. So he asks if she needs anything because he does not understand why she is just standing there. The question leaves her stunned, and she does not know what to say to him. She tries to think of an excuse, but none work. Turning to his sword, she gets a brilliant idea. The girl asks him to give it to her. Ryu immediately says he cannot. Everyone present falls silent for a moment. The little girl is surprised by his refusal and cannot understand why, so the main character explains that such things are not toys for children. 299. Those words make her furious, and she taps her foot on the floor while saying she is not a child. Ryu is at a loss about what is happening. He gives the maid a blank look. The maid understands, apologizes, and says she will call her parents right away. Guy says it's okay and he'll wait. He crouches in front of her and tells her that her parents are coming. Corinne asks whether the girl is lost. Those words make her angrier, and she begins to shake as she tells them not to mock her. She says she will take his sword by force and hurls herself at the protagonist. He dodges defiantly, stopping the girl from getting it. He doesn't understand her actions, and the girl starts screaming while demanding his sword. The girl runs back to the man to take his sword, but Ryu stops her again and runs away from her. The main character notices the girl moves too fast for a child, yet she is overly predictable. She refuses to take no for an answer and reaches out to the man, demanding what she wants. He repeats that he will not do it and finally asks Lear and Corin to help him. The girls refuse to interfere in their showdown with her. Lear says he is handling things well, and Corin only asks the main character to play with her the same way later. So Ryu realizes he should not expect any help from them. Angry, the girl starts shaking and screaming, furious that he disobeyed her. Overcome with emotion, the girl waves her clenched fists vigorously. Ryu can already see sharp claws in front of him. He does not understand how it happened. The girl says he angered her and asks whether he wants a last word, then points at the man's face and tells him to take it. The man spots nails flying toward his face, then suddenly bolts away and the princess slams into a column, hitting her head. He steps back to a safe distance while she continues shaking with anger, but he grows concerned and asks if she is all right because she is sitting on the ground and trembling. When the princess turns to face him, the main character sees her crying and says she is not paying, and the man does not know what to do since he is actually to blame for hurting her. The main character sits beside her as she stays on the floor crying, asking why she can't beat him despite being much stronger, and the guy asks her to calm down. He asks them to call a doctor. A voice from behind apologizes for the wait. It was the month of May. She brought the Empress, and they are heading straight for them. The man refuses to believe the Empress came here, so he quickly gets up from the floor and walks over to her now, asking what she has forgotten here because the maid said she would call her parents. The Empress bows her head before him, seeking forgiveness for her daughter's bad behavior. The man's whole world collapses as he cannot believe she could be the Empress's daughter, and the Empress lifts her head and with regret confirms he understood correctly that she is her daughter. The maid adds that her granddaughter is also there, and the main character refuses to accept that the girl could be her granddaughter. He asks the maid why she didn't stop the princess immediately when she began misbehaving, but the woman looks away and says she doesn't know how to deal with children. His mind finally broke as he tries to figure out who the girl's father could be, since her mother is the Empress. At last he realizes that the girl sitting on the floor before him is the heir to the throne. Ryu still refuses to accept that the girl who tried to steal his sword is a princess of the Dragon Empire. An elder comes around the corner and tells him he is always at the center of events. Ryu is surprised by the elder's arrival, who then greets the maid, calling her Tiamat. The maid says she is also pleased to see him. The Fenrir clan leader could not make sense of what was happening. After the elder was briefed on the case, it became clear the girl wanted to steal Ryu's sword, but she insisted it was not her fault, and the leader kept dodging her attacks. If he had stood still, she would have beaten him. Her grandmother can no longer tolerate this disgrace and tells the girl to calm down. He then tells her she lost and urges her to accept it, saying she will have to step up their daily training. The maid bows 90 degrees, repeatedly asking for forgiveness from the main character. Ryu brushes it off, saying it was his fault and he's fine, but Tiamat has one request for him. She asks him to help train the princess, and as she says it, she places her hand on the princess's head, leaving the man stunned and unable to believe what he has heard. He asks whether they can find someone stronger, but the maid says that in that case the princess will be afraid to arrive. Being with him calms her. The girl's parents want to ask him about it. Since she will inherit the throne, they want her to be ready. They are asking him earnestly for help. Ryu agrees, but worries he'll be a poor teacher. An elder steps up behind him, lays a hand on his shoulder, and urges him to accept because even dragons bowed to him and he still needs training. After a while, Ryu agrees to help train the girl and asks everyone to raise their heads. The princess's grandmother thanks him, but he says he is not finished and has a request in return. With his hand on his chest, he said that in return he wanted Tiamat to teach him to. Although the woman is unsure what to teach him, the main character explains he wants to prepare better for battle and that her lessons will help him. Smiling, the maid says she has no objection to these training sessions, and the man is overjoyed and thanks her. He turns to Karen intending to tell them they can rest for now, but the girl interrupts before he can finish and says she is not satisfied and will train too. Ryu doesn't understand why she would do that since it could be dangerous, and Karen says she wants to help her dad. She does not want to stay away forever, and the main character wants to calm her. But then the elder joins the conversation and says he will personally take over the guards' training. Karen cannot believe it and asks him whether that is true. Ryu asks if everything will be okay. The elder replies that since she asked, he cannot refuse her. She wants to become stronger and he is happy to help her. The head of the Fenrir family approaches Tiamat, leans in to whisper while offering her something, and Tiamat's eyes narrow sharply. She smiles at his suggestion and says, "So they should start tomorrow," and the elder still pleads not to kill him, referring to you, while the man standing next to him does not understand what is happening, but knows one thing for sure. It somehow applies to him. The next morning, the maid sends the main character flying with a single blow. He drops to his knees. The woman tells him to stand up because they are not finished yet. Ryu turns at the maid's voice and realizes she is only a devil, but he also remembers the elder is now studying with Karen and has already pictured the girl lying on the floor. Tamed keeps scolding him, saying he might manage it, but his movements are wasteful, so she tells him to conserve his strength because he tires quickly, and even teaches him a lesson with her hand. The maid continues, saying he cannot defeat the dragon with such powers. A strike sends the man flying back. Despite the struggle, he stays on his feet because he remembers Corinne and Lear are giving their best, and he cannot give in to them. Determined to stick to his goal and get stronger, he was soon sent flying by the maid again. Sometime later, the woman says it's enough for today. The princess and the main character are relieved it's finally over and both are trembling, unable to stand. Tiamat is not finished and tells them to run another 100 laps around the site, leaving both surprised it is not the end of the workout. After a while, Ryu and the princess enter the dining room. They have no strength left for anything and are very exhausted from training. The maid standing behind Lear and Karen says she will monitor their nutrition starting today, saying she will not accept objections and that she will return shortly. In Karen and Lear, the men look unwell. Someone asks if they are all right, but neither the main character nor the princess knows what to say. They exchange a look, and Ryu says even he finds it hard to bear, while the girl admits the man surprised her with his endurance. A few days later, he attacks the man who keeps dodging. After one wrong move, Ryu grabs her hand to hold her still, then pins her flat to the floor so she cannot escape. The main character says he's tired, while the princess says she can continue. Lear and Karan watch the training from the sidelines, and the girl's grandmother says hing, telling her she moves too simply and should think over her movements before attacking. It's his Ryu's turn, and he listens to the maid's criticism. She tells him he moves well but reacts too slowly. It might still work with the princess. If the enemy moves much faster, he will be in trouble, and he is asked to always closely monitor the enemy's movements. Ryu awkwardly scratches his head and reluctantly says that since she tells him to do exactly that, he has no choice. But Tiamat doesn't let him finish and assures him everything is quite simple. He must sense the opponent's mana to know where she is going and when to attack or retreat, and with this skill he will have a much clearer understanding of the battle, and after reading the opponent's mana, you will know where he will attack. Despite the maid's explanation, the man understood nothing. She sighs and says it's hard to explain in words. Then she asks whether he felt any pressure when facing a strong opponent. He remembers their first meeting with the king and the ominous aura he felt. Seeing the guy remembers the feeling, the woman says it's good because he already has an idea, and then offers to review the material he learned while unbuttoning her shirt. He doesn't understand what she's trying to do, and she covers her eyes with her hands to avoid seeing anything unnecessary. The main character asks her to stop. Then he realizes that someone or something has blocked the sun for him. Pulling his hands away from his face, he sees a huge dragon before him, the creature blocking the sun. The princess's grandmother becomes a dragon and tells him that from now on he will fight her only in that form. You cannot believe what she just said. The woman asks the man to defeat her and says he can use any weapon. Ryu learns that Tiamat will also join the battle. The girl steps closer and says he can attack her after the guy dodges her grandmother's attacks, and the guy, stunned, asks whether that is too cruel. Tamed replies that the protagonist has only himself to blame for choosing her as his teacher. The elder tells him the real training starts now and asks him to get ready. The maid flicks her tail and says they're starting. The dragon's tail struck, sending it some distance away. He had not expected such a rapid advance. A woman disguised as a dragon asks what is wrong and warns that the dark dragon's attacks will be far stronger, but the hero snatches his sword from his bosom and says he knows himself. A girl suddenly rushes out from behind, asking not to be forgotten, and the man, caught off guard, steps aside as the princess tries to attack her grandmother. Circling the dragon, she tries to confuse her while Ryu stands aside, unsure what to do. He has no choice but to dodge their blows. If he moves closer, a girl and her grandmother will attack him immediately. Tiamat saw Ryu standing lost in thought and shouted that he could not reflect during a fight, said he had forgotten their conversation, and reminded him to feel the mana. These words bring the man to his senses, and the maid then makes sure the field is completely covered with dust and tells him he will not defeat his opponent by relying only on his eyesight. Later, the man has almost no strength left, breathing heavily and fighting to stay upright as he focuses on his opponent. The dragon looks at him, decides this may be his limit, admits that for a human he did well, and remembers her recent talk with Fenrir. The Fenrir family head told the maid that Roy might be the right person. At present, the woman has not noticed any outstanding abilities in the main character. Annie thinks the elder may have been mistaken in his proposal. After a moment, the boy's aura shifts, and as with his expression, the elder and the dragon now sense the protagonist's power and see that something in him has clearly changed. The head of the Fenrir family grins contentedly, and the maid decides it's worth trying. To provoke Ryu, she asks if that's all he can do. The joyful princess charges in, seeing a great chance, while Tiamat keeps asking the main character whether she should kill him. These words surprise the girl, and she stops because she does not understand what her grandmother means. The dragon continues, saying that in his current state, the man will still die at the hands of the dark dragon. She can kill him without causing unnecessary suffering. Tiamat bent her head, looming over him. The maid disguised as a dragon says this is the end for the main character, who stands beside her at the bottom. Standing apart from the man, the princess asks her grandmother to stop. Ryu still does not understand why things turned out this way, since he wanted so much to catch up with his friends. And the main character refuses to believe all his efforts were in vain. A hand rests on his shoulder. His behavior changes instantly, and he says he won't accept this and will fight to the end because he won't give up easily. The maid senses his resolve and kicks him, raising so much dust that visibility drops to zero, and the gust from the blow nearly knocks the princess off her feet. He realizes the dragon's leg was only a couple of centimeters from his body, and it all makes sense. Manner gave him a brief view of the blow's trajectory, since dust hid everything beyond his hand, and that glimpse let him dodge the strike and stay alive. He thought he might now be able to sense the opponent's mana. The maid returned to human form and congratulated him on finally sensing it. Curious about what he thinks of a woman's acting, she still hopes the main character didn't think she was really going to kill him. The man sighs with relief and says that's how it was, but Tiamat adds that he cannot say everything was just a game. Those words leave the young man stunned. The maid says that despite everything, the main character successfully got through her ordeal and asks him to accept her congratulations. He blushes at her words and thanks the princess's grandmother. The princess herself, standing a little apart from them, waves her arms and makes a scene, telling her why she didn't know anything about it, and they would continue to train until she passed the test as well. Tiamat tells his granddaughter not to be so selfish and to stop acting up, but the main character cuts into their conversation to ask whether the princess also failed the test. Both the grandmother and the granddaughter turn to him, bewildered, not understanding his words and waiting for an explanation. The man points to a button on his vest that is about to fall off. He says the girl still hurt him and asks if it's true that her task was to impregnate him. The maid, holding her head, says that formally it was exactly like that. Still, she tells her that the princess has passed away. The girl can't believe it, and her eyes start to shine with happiness. Pleased with her small victory, she smiles as the main character sees her success, pats her on the head and says, "The princess did well," and the girl, happy with Ryu's praise, laughs and says she passed naturally because he could too. Lear and Karen stood slightly apart but watched the fight the whole time and said it was amazing. To celebrate, they offered to eat together, and when the main character saw the girls, he called their names with joy. A little farther away, Tiamat watches them quietly and peacefully, enjoying their conversation. Late that night, the elder and Tiamat drank together, and the head of the Fenrir family never thought it would happen again. Their faces are barely visible in the dim room, making it feel cozy. He remembers the old days when they couldn't stay quiet for even a minute. A maid just laughs and says at least they always had something to do. The elder asks the woman how her training sessions with the main character are progressing. The match nods and says it's fine, noting Ryu is making progress, and the elder laughs with pride, admitting he never thought the match could afford a man. The woman then says she never imagined she would train someone, and the head of the Fenrir family says that one day the main character will defeat them too. Pausing, the woman says everything is possible and she is glad the little lady follows her example. She still wonders if she can arrange the princess's marriage to Mr. Ryu. The elder choked on that statement. The news stunned him. He starts the coffee. He asks Tiamat if she is drunk or unwell, and reminds her that marrying the dragon princess to a human is not a reasonable decision and cannot be allowed. The woman grins and says it's not easy, but it's not impossible. If the main character becomes stronger than them, others will notice him. As he said, Mr. Ryu is the right person. The elder sighs heavily, agrees with the woman, and says someone he knows had a hand in this. Now the head of the Fenrir family frowns and says an ordinary person cannot have such power. He still wonders why Ryu is the one, because many people have already tried to gain his power through a contract, and each of them died a terrible death. Tiamat grows serious and says the choice is still his, and no one can stop him. If he finds out about the main character, they will face serious problems. Ryu has gained a power that no one has managed to master. The elder asks if anyone else knows about this. The woman says she doesn't think so since he has been missing for many years, and then asks how they finally met the guy. The head of the Fenrir family says he will tell her everything when the time comes, since Ryu has a hidden power no one knows about. The main character kept training with Miss Tiamat. They staged a duel. The man charged, ordered the woman to take his blow and knocked the maid back, but she stayed on her feet. After the fight, Tiamat says, Mr. Ryu has become much stronger. He asks the woman if that is true. The woman confirms it and says his skills have really improved. She is amazed at how fast he is developing, and the man cries out in joyful surprise and asks again whether it is true. He is proud and knows he is already reaping the rewards of his hard training, so he may be able to damage the dark drag. Tiamat says that because his results improved, there will be no training tomorrow. The woman looks happy, but the man looks indignant. He does not understand why the workout was canceled and asks his teacher about it. She tells him he trains every day and his body is very tired, so resting now will help him more than ever, and rest is part of the workout. She reports it to the elder and asks him why he does not spend time with Lear and Corinne, while the girl stages a duel and the head of the Fenrir family watches from a short distance. The main character likes the idea and agrees, remembering they never managed to walk around the city and thinking they might see the sights. The next morning, Mr. Ro sleeps peacefully in his bedroom but senses someone else in the room. While asleep, he hears a voice call his name and tell him to wake up. He does not know who it is, but he reluctantly opens his eyes to look at the person. Ryu opened his eyes to find Lear standing in front of him, urging him to wake up. It surprised him that she had come to wake him in person. Lear does not answer his questions but only hurries him, saying Karen is already waiting for them and asking him to get dressed faster. He had promised the girls he would walk with them today. Later, in the main shopping area, people go about their business at a relaxed pace, and the heroes are there too. He asks the girls where they should go. Karen thinks about it, and Lear says he doesn't know the city, so Karen has no suggestions about where to go. Remembering that Karen was looking at the ribbons, he suggests they go to that shop. The girl is surprised and asks if it's true. Lear says it's a great idea. Ryu looks back and asks the other person if she agrees with his proposal. Then he adds the address, Princess. The little lady is pleased she went with the guys, standing in a proud pose with her hands on her hips and a smirk. The girl replies that she certainly agrees, and since they don't know the city, she will show them everything, and they will still be grateful to her. Ryu did not expect to go for a walk with the princess, and remembering his talk with Tiamat during training, He stood in shock and asked the woman again if she really meant to take the princess with her. The girl's grandmother, looking serious, says he understood everything and explains she was asked to attend the meeting, and since there is no one to look after the princess, she asks him to do so. The main character then asks about the other servants, and the woman replies that, unfortunately, they cannot handle the princess's violent temper. Cheering him on, she tells him he'll be fine even though it's a nervous time. Although Miss Tiamat said so, he would still fly if something happened to the young lady. For inspiration, the princess asks them all to follow her. They arrive at the jewelry store at this hour. The seller bows to them, and they are the only ones in the shop. The man greets them, then asks whether they want help choosing items. The young woman says her friends want to buy jewelry, so she brought them here. Karen's eyes sparkle with happiness as she admires the jewels in the window, and Lear shares her surprise at how many pieces are on display. Lyron, Karen happily looked at the jewelry when you suddenly noticed the princess watching the girls. Suddenly, Ryuz asked the girl if she wanted to see the bright decorations together. The princess jumped in surprise. Turning away, she said haughtily that as a princess she had everything, and Ryu smiled and added that girls like jewelry. The princess held the young man's gaze and then asked if she could ask him something. Ryu was taken aback but said nothing. The princess asks the young man with a serious expression why he wants to become stronger, and Ryu is surprised and cannot answer. The girl asked him about it so suddenly, he says. Ordered by the princess to answer plainly, he scratches his cheek, says he wanted to be on par with his friends, and smiles awkwardly. He says they both got rare martial professions, but he was less lucky and fell behind them, so he wanted to become stronger. The princess asks whether the young man sought strength because his profession, like hers, is unsuccessful. Suddenly, Ryu mentions a mentor. Surprised, the princess asks what this means and whether it is really just because of the mentor. She screams that she can't believe she lost to an ordinary mentor, and Ryu shouted that he'd been training hard. He says he only gained power because of the leader. Had he not met Lear, he would have stayed a simple shepherd and never seen other countries. The princess is surprised and asks about those countries. She asks Ryu where he's been, what the people there are like, and whether they'd enjoy it. Ryu says he hasn't traveled much and has only been to one country. Ryu said the girl is a princess and asks whether she does not have to travel a lot. The princess replied that she had never left the empire, and Ryu was very surprised. As a princess, she squeezed her dress and said she could not just leave the country and felt trapped as if in a cage. Ryu told the girl he understood her. Angered, the princess asked the young man what he meant. She screamed, demanding to know how she could understand this and whether the young man was part of their royal family, and she said he could not really think she was that easy to read. Ryu smiled sweetly and said he was just like the princess. He never left his village, learned everything from his friends, envied their freedom to travel, and grew more jealous when they brought back souvenirs. The stunned princess was asked if she truly felt the same, and she was surprised. She suddenly screamed that it was exactly like that her parents and grandmother always take care of the princess. But even custody has its limits, and he really wants to see the world, while she wants to see every country in the world. The girl says she wants to discover a place no one has seen, earn praise from others, meet different people, and try different foods. She mentions one more thing and awkwardly says finding friends is possible. But although she can manage on her own, it's not that simple. Ryu assumed she was trying to make friends with them. Then he called Karen and asked him to look at his new ribbons, which they had just chosen. Did you ask the girl if she really had already chosen the ribbons? He said they suited her very well. Corinne asked the young man if they really looked very cute. Looking at the princess, she asked what she and Ryu had been talking about. The girl flinched at the unexpected question. The princess looked away and admitted quietly that there was nothing special. Ryu smiled and said the princess really wants to be friends with them. The girl looked very confused and panicked. The girl cried out and asked the young man who had allowed him to say such a thing, and Corinne was very surprised to hear it. Corinne looked puzzled and asked if they were already friends. The princess was very surprised. The princess asked Corinne what she meant. Corinne thought for a moment and said they eat and train together too. Delighted, she asked whether that meant they were already friends. The princess screamed and said this was certainly not the case. Karen says she, her dad, and her sister are family, but would be happy to make friends, and she asks whether the princess would like to be friends with her. The girl was very upset. The princess was so surprised by the question that she stepped back from the girl and tried to explain herself. Ryu and Lior exchanged glances and smiled. Ryu said she would also be happy if they became friends. Lior barely sighed and said she didn't have many friends either. Our Corinne wore a serene expression. The princess was a little tense. The princess cried out that she would be friends with them and they could call her by her first name. Karen was pleased and said they should pick a ribbon for Orake, too. The princess looked surprised, asked about the ribbon, and said she already had one. Corinne smiled, took the girl's hand, and told Okada to come with them. It will be proof of their friendship. She asked Oka if that was really what friends did, and Oka, stunned, pressed her lips together. Oscar replied positively as Ryu and Lear stood to the side, and Lear smiled that they seemed to be having a lot of fun, while Ryu said it was good they became friends so quickly. Ryu suddenly asked Lear why she hadn't bought anything, reminding her they had money from selling the materials, so she shouldn't be shy. He shows her a necklace with a beautiful pendant and asks if she can use it. Lear replies that the chains look like a collar and she does not like them. Then the girl says sadly that she would only get in the way during the fight. The young man offers to treat her. Ryu suddenly looks away, surprised. Placing a scarf on the lyre, he asks whether the scarf will do. Surprised, the girl asks whether it's really a scarf. Ryu says that if it's inconvenient to wear around her neck, she can tie it around her arm. It also suits Lear's black hair. Ryu says if a girl doesn't like it, they can watch something else. Lear replies that everything is fine, then suddenly smiles and thanks Ryu from the bottom of his heart. After a while, a group of men leave the shop and the seller thanks them for their purchase. The girls ask Ro where they will go next. Lear asks whether there are other popular shops, and the princess asks them to follow her. Smiling, she says she's sure they'll like it. Suddenly, the princess stops. Ryu asks the girl what happened. The princess looks surprised. A huge dragon fills the sky when she looks up, grinning as it stares down at Ryu's group. A maid suddenly appears before Ryu. He recognizes her as Mrs. Tiamat and asks what happened. Mrs. Tiamat gives them a serious look and says they have problems. Lady Tiamat says the seal in the Dragon of Darkness's cave has weakened too much. He'll break out sooner than they expected. You got scared and asked what it meant. Tiamat warned that preliminary forecasts said he would break out today, so they should prepare well. Ryu was shocked and panicked, then asked if it would really be today. Then silence fell, and someone asked if it was really starting. People frowned and said it felt too sudden, but there was no other way out. He asks Mrs. Tiamat if he can see the seal, and the girl agrees, saying she was looking for them for that reason. She suggests they return to the castle, then all go together to the cave. A wall split open in the huge, dark cave. The monster's tail was visible, darting across the stone floor. The monster grinned and said he would be free soon. His eyes glowed with a bright flame, and he was glad he would soon get what he wanted. A huge dragon soared across the bright, clear sky. Lear said the long-awaited hour had come. Corinne was utterly serious and agreed at that moment. Ryu tensed up. Turning to Lady Tiamat, he asked whether the girl had already fought the dark dragon. Tiamat looked very surprised. Miss Tiamat said she was too young then to fight, but her relatives could, and one of them was very strong. You thought that even Tiamat, this dark dragon, would be a formidable opponent, and he doubts he can handle it. Ryu tensed and Tiamat noticed, telling him not to fill his head with unnecessary thoughts. Though human, the young man is not weak at all. He has achieved a lot during this time, and she tells him that if he cannot believe himself, he should believe her. Tiamat confidently told the young man to believe in himself because he is strong. Ryu was surprised but quickly agreed with confidence. The princess grabbed his head and said she would try too, because she would not take all the credit herself. Ryu said he didn't need it at all. After a while, they arrived at a huge, dark cave where many magicians had gathered deep inside and began using magic to create a seal. A man suddenly appeared and asked the magicians how things were. One male magician called him the Emperor. Ryu asked Miss Tiamat who those people were. The girl said they were the Empire's spellcasters who feed magic into the seal to make it last longer. The man suddenly shouted that the seal would not hold much longer, and another caster said the dragon would wake in a few minutes. The Emperor told the spellcasters he accepted the information. They said to leave the rest to them, Then a strange black liquid began to flow between the stones. The seal collapsed in an instant, and everyone was horrified and stunned. Even the emperor could not hide his emotions, and the magicians were shocked too. The emperor ordered everyone to evacuate at once because the dragon was about to break free. Suddenly, the whole cave began to shake. A strange liquid began pouring more and more strongly from the crack. At that moment, someone said he had been waiting for this day for so long. Lear, Karen, and Ryu were very surprised. A moment later, a huge three-headed dragon appeared before them, its body covered in strange markings. Scanning the crowd, he said there were dragonites and Fenrir. The dragon noticed a man among them and asked if the young man was truly a hero. Startled, Ryu asked what it meant and tried to protest he was no hero, while the emperor ordered his men to prepare for battle and keep their guard up. The dragon dismissed them as annoying insects, said he was not interested in any of them, then cast a spell. Then he orders everyone to leave. Suddenly a group has magical seals. The men yelled, asking what it was and ready to retreat, but the dragonites in Fenrir vanished the next moment, leaving Ryu stunned. The princess and Lear immediately began calling for their father and mother, and he returned to the dragon to ask him where he had sent them. The monster said he had just transported them to another dimension and wanted to fight them. It's all because they are this boy's band. He laughs and asks them to make him laugh. At that moment, a huge wolf tried to smash the stone wall, but the large chip in the wall took longer to break loose. The man said he couldn't get through. Grandma Lear said the space looked like it had been made by dragon magic. The girl said that was very powerful magic. The emperor said we must hurry because Lear is there alone. The man told the wolf not to rush. They trained hard for this day so they would be able to cope. We need to figure out how to get out of here. Suddenly, a black snake crawled across the ground. The blonde-haired girl shouted at the man to be careful. The man suddenly dodges and the snake misses him. Then, seeing many dark snakes crawling, he called them creatures of darkness. Surrounded, they knew the situation could not get worse and that the dark dragon had wasted no time. The huge dark dragon was charging a magic attack from his magic seal, casting a spell. He suddenly spat out a large amount of dark liquid, and the young man dodged nimbly. The dragon was surprised and said the young man had dodged again, ordered him to stop running and attacking, and Ryu shouted that he didn't need to be asked twice. Ryu rushed toward the dragon and struck it. The dragon could not dodge, which surprised Ryu. He then realized the monster had deliberately left itself open. A strange liquid appeared behind Ryu's back. Lady Tiamat warned Ryu to be careful because he can create dark creatures from blood. A dark snake slid into view. Miss Tiamat warned Ryu not to attack thoughtlessly, or he would be at a disadvantage. You chopped up the creature of darkness, the snake, and he clucked that he understood what Miss Tiamat meant. This Tiamat thought the dark dragon had grown much stronger, and even a scratch on his arm could spawn creatures of darkness. If you do not kill him with a single blow, the situation will become disastrous, and they will be overwhelmed by numbers, and all die. Miss Tiamat looked at the young man intently and realized that in this situation their strength came from him. Instantly, the dragon launched a magical attack and challenged them, casting a powerful spell. Ryu swung his sword toward him and tried to say they were still together, but he ran out of time. Many magical seals formed around the dark dragon, leaving Ryu, Olika, Karen, and Lear stunned and frightened. Several seals launched a huge attack straight at Ryu's groups. The latter said in surprise that they could not avoid such an attack at all, and he had only just woken up but already had a sudden burst of strength. The dragon asked the people what was the matter and whether they had come to kill him. Ryu believed that doing nothing would mean death, while attacking would only produce more creatures of darkness, and he doesn't know what to do. Miss Tiamat called to Ryu, telling him not to rush, to think through the plan carefully, and to do what he can. Mrs. Tiamat thought it over, noting Ryu and the others had grown stronger but still lacked combat experience, and hoped the Emperor and the others would return in time. Until then, she must protect them. Princess Oka appears and says you only need to strike once to destroy the shadows. Smiling and placing her hand on her chest, she tells everyone to give it to her. Reincarnated as a dragon, the girl says she will kill him before he can activate the spells. Suddenly, Mrs. Tiamat shouted to Ozika to wait. In an instant, Oluka transforms into a very cute little dragon, and Ryu realizes it is Oluki's dragon form. Oka lunged straight at the dragon, shouting that it was finished, and at that moment, Lady Tiamat also shifted into a dragon. The dark dragon grinned, said it was stupid, then triggered the magic seal and froze the oaks in mid-air. It became clear the huge dark dragon was using silent magic. Ryu, frightened, calls out Shoutsoki's name. Suddenly, a huge explosion goes off. Oka tries to wipe dust from her eyes, then suddenly opens them and freezes. Tiamat's body lies in front of her. The girl is unconscious and shows no signs of life. Ryu shouts Tiamat's name, and Uka trembles with fear as the dark dragon asks whether Tiamat sacrificed herself for others and calls it a foolish act. Brushing Tiamat aside with his tail, he told her to go away. Oneka immediately called her grandmother and flew to her body. Paralyzed by magic, Tiamat thought she could not move, and now she realizes she must get up. The dark dragon doubts they deserve to be called heroes and says the previous hero was far superior. Laughing, he asks them all to try to make him laugh. Lear, Corinne, and Ryu are very tense and don't know what to do now. The huge dark snake rushes in from the side toward the huge wolf, but the wolf pins it to the ground and destroys it. He told the other wolves that everyone was trampling them, and it would never stop. The man thinks it's bad. They were too late. You and the others need to hurry. He knows he must quickly come up with something before it's too late. In his head, he asks Ryu and the others to hang on as long as possible. The huge dark dragon now praised and ordered his opponents to attack him. Oko tried to bring her grandmother to her senses, asked her to hold on, and kept calling her. The dark dragon said that removing the interference might make you serious again. The protagonist shouted Ahaka and Tiamat's names, and the princess turned and saw a magic attack coming straight at them. Oka pressed against Tiamat and shut his eyes as a massive explosion rocked the area. And after a moment, he opened them to see Ryu and Lefhir in the dust. Ryu holding a dagger before him, and tense. Frightened, Oka looked at the young man and the girl, about to speak when Ryu shouted and asked the girl to calm down. Ryu turned to Oseka and told her to remember why she was here. Oseka admitted it was her fault that Grandma was hurt. Ryu went on, saying that if the girl died, Tiamat would cry because all her efforts to protect her had failed. With a confident look, Ryu said all hope now rested on them, so Tiamat defended them with all her might. Odiko was very surprised. Ryu smiled and asked the girl to join him in the fight. He called to Olinka again. The girl was surprised. At that moment, Tiamat woke and tried to speak, but Oka reassured her grandmother and promised she would not do anything rash again. Oka joined Lear, Karin, and Ryu, announcing they would fight together from now on. Everyone was very serious about it. The dark dragon laughed, said he was so pleased with their pathetic attempts, and ordered them to show everything they could. Stretching out his hand covered in countless magic seals, he leads the reuse group straight toward the dark dragon. You jumped side to side, dodging the monster's attacks, as Corinne stood beside the dragon, prepared to attack, and then channeled a massive amount of power directly at it. The dark dragon reactivated the magic seal, grinned, and asked if the girl had really decided to attack with fire, then snapped his fingers, said they would get rid of her first, and began casting a spell. A magical seal suddenly forms beneath the girl, and huge dark tentacles burst out, and she spots them at once while Ryu sees them too and shouts to Karin to be careful. She tried to dodge and flew the other way, but the dark tentacles headed straight for her. One tentacle reached for Karin's leg, but Lear cut it with her paw, saving Karin from death. Lear landed and asked Corinne if she was okay. Corinne was delighted and thanked her sister for saving her. The dark dragon grinned and said they would attack next. Ryu and Oduka rushed straight at the monster. Okusha shouted she would not let the dragon do that. The dark dragon activated a magic seal directly in front of its body and blocked Ryu and Oki's attack. The dark dragon dismissed it as a useless attack, then launched a sweeping strike and Owika and Ryu tried to dodge. Ryu and Ogoka stepped back and looked serious. Ryu did not know what to do and felt very tense. Ryu believed Tiamat had warned him to avoid using his spells at all costs. Simple attacks would not hurt him, and when wounded he would summon creatures of darkness. Ro could not see how they could defeat such a monster. The dark dragon is distracted by Karin, Lear, and Orenka's return to the fight, while Ryu recalls his TMI training and watches Lyra battle the dragon, convinced it must have a weakness. In the next moment, the dark dragon grinned as dust swirled around him, and Ryu suddenly had an epiphany, fixing his gaze on the dragon and thinking that using magic reading might make a difference. The dark dragon's tail ornament suddenly glowed, and a frightened Ryu watched closely as he activated the magic seals. A magic seal appears on the ground, but Lear evades it, and Oka also fights him. You thought it couldn't be, but if it was true, there was no choice. He takes out a pen, turns suddenly to Lear and Corin in his mind, and says he has a question for them. He lays out his plan, leaving Lear and Karen very surprised, and they ask what the young man means, while Lear asks if he understands how dangerous it is. Ryu is certain they can handle it together, and even if something happens, he believes they can protect the young man. Lear and Karen were very surprised. Ryu says he believes in them and wants to try to carry out this plan. Lear clenches her fangs, says she understood, and suggests they do it. Karen says she will try too. Oka volunteers to try as well, but Ryu interrupts and asks Okuda to listen to him. The dragon asks whether they have decided to act, and if they are really sure, he will allow it. Activates a magic seal, says it's not like that, and then casts a spell. Lear jumps up and finds himself next to the dark dragon, which thinks he has broken the spell. Smiling, he says it's some kind of fast dog, but it can't dodge in mid-air. Then activates the magic seal and aims it at the liars. A strange magical current formed and completely enclosed the dark dragon. The dragon was surprised and asked whether they had really limited the scope to the guard's flame. He looked around, then smiled and said they were fools and only playing into his hands. Looking up, he suddenly sees Oroka appear from the open space, charging straight at the dark dragon. Oka crashes headfirst into the dark dragon's body, sways and grows disoriented. The geared flame did not work and he cannot understand why. Looking at Odika, he expects only bones to be left. Suddenly, he notices a feather in her mouth that had been protecting her. Earlier, Ryu turned to Oseka and Astrid had taken Karen's pen. With it, Oseka will not take fire damage because the feather is protected, so Oseka does not have to worry. Ryu told Uguka, the dark dragon's magic is powerful, but you only need to stop the dragon from activating it. He also explained where his magic came from, and the dark dragon, tapping the ground, called it very interesting and asked whether they had really decided to attack him again. The dark dragon smirks and says he will send her to his grandmother. The monster activates the magic seal. Oka smiles and says the only fool here is the dark dragon. The next moment, the dark dragon recoils from a sharp pain, turns and sees his severed tails. Lear severed the dark dragon's tail with her sharp claws. Ryu said the tail is the source of the dark dragon's magic. The dark dragon realized the group had planned this from the start, laughed, said he understood, and asked if they thought they could take his magic. Suddenly, the severed tail begins to deform and a swarm of dark snakes pours out, and the dark dragon directs them, saying his creatures will deal with them. Laughing, he said they needed to advance, and ordered Ryu and his team to cheer him up a little more. He orders them to fight harder and harder until they reach their limits. That's exactly what he wanted. Suddenly, the dark dragon looks surprised and puzzled, scans the area, and realizes someone is missing from the group and finds that strange. Suddenly remembering Ryu, he realizes the hero is not here. Watching Lear attack the dark dragon, he sees it dodge. The dragon suspects Ryu is up to something, so it shouts at the hero, asks where Ryu is, and demands to see him. The next moment, Ryu steps out from behind the liar and says he is here, grinning as his blade begins to glow. The dark dragon looks at his glowing blade and realizes he has poured magic into it. He had been gathering magical power all this time. The dark dragon grins and says, this is what he has been looking for so long. A real hero, and Ryu's screams a threat at the dragon before attacking him. As the young man's blade strikes the dragon's body, a massive explosion erupts. A sudden, powerful gust of wind nearly knocks Karen and Lyra off their feet. Olauka sees a huge plume of air and smoke after the explosion and strains to make out the main character and the dragon. The dust cleared, revealing a dark figure lying on the ground, unconscious but showing signs of life. At that moment, Oka, Lear, and Karina watched the scene closely. Ryu looked at the dark dragon's body and then asked if they had really won. Ryu sees the dark dragon's head shows no sign of life. It suddenly dawns on him, and he turns to find Lear, Karina, and Oka there. Rushing to the young man, the girls rejoiced that they had won and succeeded, and everyone kept saying they had defeated the dark dragon. Otaka went straight to Tamed and shouted that she would help her now. At that moment, as you notice something inside the dark dragon's body, He began to move his lips and shift slightly. The dark dragon called it an impressive punch and a display of raw power. Even Ryu managed to defeat him, the dragon of darkness. As a reward for his efforts, he asks you for what he wants. The dragon then calls the young man a hero and says his knowledge of magic will do. Ryu doubts the dragon will fight again and tells the dark dragon he did not fight for the reward. Ryu asks the dragon to explain his goal and why he wanted to fight the hero so much. A dark dragon lay on the ground. He said he only wanted to fight a strong opponent. He only wanted to see how strong he was, so he needed a suitable opponent because people came here to drive. Still, no one could last long, and the dark dragon saw that only a hero could match him. Fear of him spread to everyone, including the heroes, so they decided to seal him. Ryu, Liar, Oka, and Ryu were stunned. With his last strength, the dark dragon said he only wanted to find someone who could match his strength. The dark dragon says being born with great power is a real curse, and the young man is surprised by those words. Ryu remembered his comrades saying they had grown much stronger and were setting off on a journey. Unable to fight, Ryu had to stay in the village. Ace. They said goodbye and told him to care for the village animals. Ryu clenched his fist, thinking of the dark dragon's loneliness. The dark dragon asked what was wrong and demanded the young man say what he wanted, and when nothing came to mind, he told the young man to just finish him off. But you interrupt and say you have decided everything. Smiling, he speaks to the dragon of darkness, points to himself, and invites the dragon to be friends. Lear, Oka, and Karen were surprised, and the dark dragon was too. Lear shouted at Ryu and demanded to know what he was carrying. The dark dragon asked the young man what he meant. Ryu said he understood him better than anyone. Despite his great power, the dark dragon was very lonely. Ryu drooped a little and placed his hand on his chest. Lear and Corinne looked at Ryu with deep sadness. The young man stepped forward and told the dragon they had defeated him. Ryu reaches out to the lying dragon, says they are equals, and offers the dark dragon his friendship. Ryu smiles and asks the dark dragon if he will grant his wish. The dragon looks surprised and falls silent, about to answer. Suddenly, Osaka interrupts and says she is against it. Oscar said the dark dragon killed many people and hurt her grandmother, so she will not be friends with such a creature. Forgiving him could let the dark dragon start killing again, and she points to its reclining head. After hearing his story, Ro realized the dark dragon would no longer kill. Oka was about to speak, but Tiamat cut her off. Checking her body, the lady says they defeated the dark dragon and the spell has lifted from her, and Odeka rejoices and rushes into his grandmother's arms. And that told Ryu that in the monster world only the strongest survive, so the choice is up to Ryu. Ryu thought it over and said if the dark dragon turned evil again, they could defeat him. If they could beat him now, they could do it again. Turning to Uka, he says they may not trust him but asks whether she believes him, and Uka tenses. Oka remembers every moment with Ryu. Turning away, she says she will agree only this time, and warns that if anything happens, it will be on the young man's conscience. Ryu thanks her. Reo turns to the dark dragon and asks for his answer. The dragon laughs and calls it a strange wish. He agrees and asks the young man for permission to heal him. A bright glow appears from his hand, and the dragon points to the young man. The dark dragon says it will prove their friendship, and a bright glow flows into the young man's body. Ryu is surprised when the dark dragon says he put a piece of his soul into the young man. Then the dragon vanishes after saying they will see each other again soon, leaving the main character stunned by his sudden disappearance. His body buckled and he collapsed to the ground. Lear rushed to him. After a while, the young man regains consciousness. Lying on someone's lap, he realizes he passed out. Ryu wakes up and asks where he is. The girl says Ryu has finally woken up. Surprised, Ryu spots UR and the girl smiles sweetly. Ryu says they haven't seen each other for a long time and then asks if she has really woken up. It turns out the girl recovered. And replies she has, but can only talk to the young man in this world. Ryu told the young man he was too reckless and then stood stunned. Bertessi said the young man was constantly near death during the dragon battle and in training, and wanting to grow stronger is natural, but he is taking far too many risks. You realize from what the girl said about training that was the one who lent him strength. The main character said he understood and would be more careful from now on. Smiled and said she was glad to hear that. Ryu then said the dark dragon was planning to put part of his soul into it. She agrees, says that's exactly how it is and that the egg is in that direction, and points directly at him. Ryu looked at the egg and asked whether it was truly the dark dragon's egg, his soul, and said it looked beautiful. Smiled and said the dragon of darkness was not evil at first. Once a golden dragon, always seeking new knowledge, he learned forbidden magic and turned into a dragon of darkness, still an ordinary dragon but with an unusually strong soul. Reo said he understood everything, and says Ro is very kind before grins. She suggests Ryu spared the dark dragon because is a dragon too. Ryu studies her and thinks he does not want to take anyone's life so easily. We reply that this is why she liked the young man. Bert takes the egg and says they'll return to the subject. She asks you to take a closer look. The young man is surprised to see a small dragon inside the egg. Bert says that in this egg, he is rebuilding his body. You were asked whether he would really come to life someday, or you agreed and told the young man not to worry because she would look after this dragon. She told Ryu it was time to say goodbye. Ryu hesitated and began to interrupt her. He asked when could leave the young man's body, and was very surprised. Ryu said has always been alone here and he feels sad realizing how lonely she is. Said she is not lonely. Ryu feels safe and very comfortable inside, so she asks the young man not to worry. He then asks whether, if he becomes a demon lord, the girl will be able to come out, and Gates is scared and shudders, or replies that she can get out. Ryu is happy, but the girl adds that there is no need to do this. A powerful demon lord who commands other demons tells Ryu never to become one, suggests they end the conversation for now, and Ryu asks the girl to stop. They smile sadly and say they will be able to talk to you later. The young man calls the girl, but she does not hear. The young man wakes after a while, and everyone stands happily around Ryu's bed as Ms. Tiamat says she is glad Ryu is okay. Reo looks surprised and asks where they are. Lear explains that after Ro fell, they met their grandparents and everyone returned safely to the castle. Ryu realizes he must have been unconscious and thanks everyone for their help. Tiamat says the young man still does not seem fully recovered and should rest. Lear tells him to call her if he feels unwell. Ryu agrees and tells the girls to rest too. Ryu is left alone. The young man is relieved that is safe, and it looks like she forced him out of the dream, but he still doesn't understand why he shouldn't become a demon lord. Thought everything was exactly as it seemed. If Ryu becomes the demon lord, she can leave this place. But with that power, Ryu would be very lonely and would have to sacrifice all his friends. Thinking of Ryu, she asks whether the main character can handle it. Soon the city celebrated and everyone joyfully ate, drank, danced, and sang, celebrating the defeat of the Dragon of Darkness. They drained every cup and blessed the Dragon Emperor and Lord Ryu. Lear walked up to Ryu, smiled, and said the young man had become very popular. Ryu agreed, adding that people in the city were no longer giving him a pass. After a while, Ryu, Karen, and Lear arrive at the Emperor's palace, where Emperor Aishin asks to thank them again, and says they could not have defeated the evil dragon without their help. The Emperor asks what she wants as a reward, and a frightened Ryu says he shouldn't. Smiling, the Emperor tells the young man not to be shy and says he cannot let them go without a reward, so they may ask for anything. Ryu thinks that despite the Emperor's words, he does not know what to ask for and has no ideas. Ryu asks what he may ask for, and the Emperor replies the young man may request anything his heart desires, such as treasures, artifacts, or the right to live in a palace. Ryu considers it. Miss Tiamat smiles, apologizes for interrupting, and offers an idea about the reward. After a moment's thought, she grins and asks the young man why he should not choose her as his reward, and Ryu, Ogaka, Lear, and Karen look stunned and ask what she means. Lear asks whether Mrs. Tiamat truly wants to be his wife. Corinne asks whether Tiamat will marry Dad. Oka asks what Grandma is talking about. You laugh nervously and say the Emperor will never agree to this, but the Emperor and his wife say they do not mind at all. The Emperor asks Ryu how he'll answer, noting it would be nice to have a dragon for a wife, and Ryu stands confused, surrounded by his teammates. Panicked, the young man looks at Mrs. Tiamat and asks why she is doing this. Mrs. Tiamat covers her mouth with her hand and asks what she said. Suddenly, the Emperor asked the young man whether he truly disliked the proposal. The emperor then asks whether Ro could take Lady Tiamat's claws. Ryu is surprised and asks the emperor what he means by claws. The emperor agrees and explains that strong weapons and simple armor are made from dragon claws and scales, and that those materials can be used to upgrade equipment. The young man wants something else. He tells the emperor it will do, then turns to Lady Tiamat. The girl laughed nervously. The emperor said the young man would receive the dragon claws reward, that he would prepare everything, and that they could rest in the meantime. At that moment, Eureka exhaled. After a while, Ryu trained with Lear and Karen and practiced with a blade. Lear asks you if the young man is okay. The young man wiped his sweat. Lear added that the young man has not yet recovered and may rest a little longer, although you said he was fine, so he should keep practicing. Ryu thought the dark dragon still hadn't recovered. It's good Ura is looking after him. The dark dragon needs to get much stronger to catch up with the heroes. Orica stepped up to Ryu, handed him a bottle and a towel, and told Joyous to take them. The girl asked whether the young man had really trained that hard. Unfortunately, that's all she can do to help. The young man thanks the girl, then watch carefully as Ryu wipes his sweat. Ryu asks the girl what's wrong. She says it's nothing, then asks what the young man will do after he gets the award. Ryu says he plans to look for his friends later and asks Olaka what she wants to do. Suddenly, Oka becomes nervous and asks the young man if she can go with him and his companions. Ryu asks what the emperor will say. Oka tells him not to worry because her father said it would be good for her to tell the world. If they ask together, he will allow it. She says she would go with them if possible. Ryu was amazed, then remembered the girl had said she really wanted to travel. Oka believed herself a princess and felt she couldn't simply leave the country, but wanted it badly. Suddenly, Karen broke the silence. Karen is happy and says she agrees and doesn't mind traveling with her at all. Lear said they couldn't do that at all. The room fell silent. Ro said everything was in order and they could not make such an important decision alone. Oshika said nothing. Ro patted the girl's head and told her not to worry, they would go with her. Ryu smiles and says they will definitely get the emperor's permission and asks the girl to trust him. Oku beamed, clenching her fists and smiling as she asked if that was true. As they prepared to go to the emperor, a man stepped in and said the emperor was calling them and would escort them to the throne room. Soon, the group reaches the throne room where a huge table fills the space, and the emperor pulls a white cloth off it and announces it is the man's reward. 5 claws lay on this table. Ro was surprised at how many there were. The emperor said Tiamat had explained that each claw worked differently, so they had prepared several options. Earth dragon claws are powerful, water dragon claws are supple and graceful, and the air dragon's claws are light and sharp. The emperor said there are also special ones, and then asks the young man to pick any claws he likes. Ryu reads the claws and realizes there are many different types, so he cannot tell which one to choose. Suddenly, he notices the claw and says he likes it. He finds it immediately clear that the claw is special and fits comfortably in his hand. The emperor smiled and said he had a diamond in his eye. The emperor said this claw belonged to Tiamat. Ryu was stunned and asked if it really belonged to her. The emperor said they were lucky the student chose the teacher's claw. Tiamat blushed and told the emperor to stop. The emperor snapped his fingers and offered a better idea, asking Ryu why he should not bring Tiamat along, surprising both Ryu and Tiamat. Ohaka, Karen, and Lear were also surprised. When the emperor asked Tiamat if she enjoyed training with Ryu, she said she was obliged to care for Mrs. Oke, so she had to decline. Ryu sees Utuka looking very nervous as she clutches the hem of her dress. Ryu smiled and nodded to the girl. She clenched her fist. Oseka stamped her heel and turned to her grandmother and father, saying that if her grandmother does not want to go, she would like to travel with Ryu. She says she's thought about it for a long time and intends to see every wonder of the world herself, and even if others oppose her, she will not give up. Bokabos asks her grandmother and father to let her go on a trip. Suddenly, everyone began whispering that Miss Aweka was still a child and it was too dangerous. The emperor says he understands the girl's feelings, but she is still too young and must wait a few more years. Tiamat disagrees. Oka fought the dragon of darkness and did well. Tiamat believes Oka has matured enough. She will be with you and he's strong, so there should be no problems. Tiamat thinks they should let Uka go. The girl is surprised by her grandmother's words. Tiamat turns to the young man and says she has one condition. She says Ryu must protect Oku during the journey. If Oku is hurt, the young man will not escape punishment from the scientific authorities. It could lead to an international scandal. She asks the young man whether he is ready to take responsibility for Oka. At that moment, Grandma is very serious. Oka says Ryu doesn't have to agree to this because Ryu can protect herself. Tiamat said that in a previous interview, Oka had shown the opposite. Turning to the reviewer, she says that if the young man cannot protect the lady, he cannot give consent. He then asks her to answer the question. Reo grows quiet, then says he will speak frankly, but he cannot promise that. He can't predict what will happen during the journey, so he can't promise Okinawa will be safe. The girl becomes frightened. Ryu promised he would definitely help her if anything happened, not because she was a princess, but because they were friends. So they ask Miss Tiamat to allow Okaika to travel with her friends. Ryu then bows. Mrs. Tiamat frowned, then smiled. She asked whether Ro was actually a friend of the princess, and Ro panicked, admitting it. Lady Tiamat turns to the emperor and asks what he will say and whether he will let Orika go. The emperor smiled, said he could not refuse their benefactor's request, and told Oganka she could go on a trip. Oki's fist trembles, and the girl rejoices, saying she can tell the world. Reo turns to Oka and says he is very happy. Oka thanks Reo. Mrs. Tiamat interrupts and says she has one condition. The point is that she goes with them. Ryu looks surprised and asks Mrs. Tiamat. Okay, also surprised, turns to his grandmother. Tiamat says she never said she wouldn't let them go alone. Tiamat said that if they cause problems in another country, it could lead to an international conflict and also create difficulties for Mr. Ryu. Tiamat asked the young man to be understanding. Lear says she does not mind, and Karina adds it will be more fun that way. Suddenly they ask Opaka what is wrong. Opaka says she was simply glad to finally have her freedom. The emperor laughed and told her not to speak like that. Before they left, the man said he wanted to talk. The emperor says he has a request for the young man. Ryu, surprised, asks what the request is. The emperor asks you if they can visit the elf village. Many spirits live in the elf forest, and the spirit king recently sent a message asking Ru to help with a case. Ru is surprised and asks whether the king really needs his help. The emperor agrees and says the news of the Dragon of Darkness's death is spreading fast, so he asks him to lend his powers. People have begun kidnapping elves, and he requests that all the poachers be captured. They capture spirits and sell captured elves as servants. He cannot easily appear in human settlements, so he asks the young man for help. Ryu said he understood because he is human too. Reo thought he had asked for help from a man he hated. He doesn't mind helping, but worries about what the others will say. Suddenly, he heard the girls telling Ryu to do his EC's fit. Lear says she's sure they all think the same way. OK says this is the best part of traveling because it lets the young man do what he wants. Reo agreed and said he would go to the elf village. The emperor said he felt honored that Ro had asked for his help and was very pleased. Ryu realizes he is meant to speak to the king of spirits himself. The emperor said the village elder would speak for him. The elves' village is in the south of the great forest. He said he understood, and then they set off. Emperor Yuke wants her to have lots of fun on her trip. Mom wished the girl good luck. Oka smiled, said goodbye to her parents, and said they had gone. Everyone was very happy. After a while in the southern part of the great forest, the Ryu's group pushed through thick undergrowth. Ryu said walking here is difficult because of the roots. Tiamat said this area has many large trees. They are approaching the elven village, and it will be easier to go further. Ryu said he understood everything, then turns to the others and says, there is very little left. He looks at Ogunka, who is out of breath and clearly upset, and she says she is fine while trying to catch her breath. Tiamat urged the girl to hurry. At this pace, they will never get there. Tiamat told the princess to treat it like a workout and urged her to do her best. Uyoko was upset. Ryu said it was tough. Ryu mentioned this was his first time in this part of the forest. Miss Tiamat said that was fine. Ryu's spirits raised a barrier around the village so no one could find it. Lear said they could not get into the village. Guardian spirits surround the barrier, and if visitors identify themselves, the spirits will let them in. Ryu's smiled and said they already seemed close. The young man looked surprised and glanced to the side. They saw the young man's small spirit. Ro was very happy, and Corinne said it was the first time they had seen them. Ryu asked the spirit if he had really come to meet them. Then the spirit pointed out the way and flew there. Ryu did not know whether to follow him or what had happened. They did not know where the spirit was flying at high speed. The Tiamat said she did not understand, and they began moving away from the village. At that moment, the young man heard a voice. Suddenly, someone attacked them, and Lear and Ryu felt a little scared. Then they saw a huge number of spiders. Tiamat said these monsters are called forest spiders. You could not tell where so many of them had come from. And then Corinne turned to the young man and asked him to look away. Huge spiders attacked people. Ryu said he had to help them. They quickly handled a group of spiders. One of the spiders attacked the young man, leaving him stunned. Ryu asked whether he was really safe, and Lear agreed, saying he had fainted. Tiamat said he did not appear to have any serious injuries. In an instant, the spirit flew up to the young man. Ryu said that was why he had brought them here, and then someone in the carriage called out to a man and asked if he could help them. Elves were trapped in a cage and asked the young man to free them. Lear and Ryu were surprised to see the elves in the wagon. After a while, they were released. The elves thanked the young man and said they could not give a reward now. Ryu said he did not need anything, and that he had come at the Spirit King's request. Ogaka said everything was fine. Ryu said the spirit brought them here. The elf is surprised. Then the spirit appears, gestures for silence, and smiles. After a while, people wake up confused, not knowing what happened, because forest spiders attacked them. They ran shouting that they did not care about the elves because they had to escape and their lives mattered to them. Then they realized they had fled without thinking and suddenly discovered something on the ground. He spots a sword bearing a striking emblem that appears on everything. Tiamat said she had never seen anything like this before. They all appear to be from the same group, and that group is clearly large. Even the nobles might be members of this organization. Ryu's says no more information is needed. They must go to the village to speak with the King of Spirits and escort the elves home. After a while, they walk through a dense forest. Ryu now thinks the kidnapped elves are 4 women and 2 children, and the idea that even children were taken makes him dread what those people planned for them. We must stop these poachers right away and protect the elves and spirits. The elf girl says they're almost there. They only need to go through the bushes, and then they reach their home. Ryu, surprised, says, "This is an elf village." The little spirit flies off, and Ro says goodbye to him. An elf runs up and calls out to Helen. He pulls her into his arms and tells her he's glad she's okay. She says she is in pain, and the elf replies he was so worried when she was kidnapped. "Do you understand that they are a family?" Helen points at the young man and says he saved them. The man bows and thanks you for saving Helen. Ryu says no thanks are needed and he only helped in a difficult moment. Helen calls her grandfather and says they came to them at the King of Spirits' request, and the man asks whether that is true, then identifies the young man as Mr. Ryu. Clearing his throat, he introduces himself as the village elder Alrais Solon and presents his granddaughter, Helen. Ryu is surprised the man is an elder and realizes he looks no older than 20. He wonders if elves age at all. At this point, I'll take them to the King of Spirits, so he asks the others to follow him. They reach the house with a round table after a while. Several people are already seated and only one chair is empty. The elder turns to the Lord and says, "Mr." Ryu has arrived at his request and believes they can begin saving their kin. Ryu offers to discuss strategy. The elder agrees. Many of their relatives have been kidnapped by traders and will soon be sold into the ministry. He had a plan to deal with them, and Ryu asked what it was. The elf elder said that they would break into the houses of the nobles who bought their brothers, free all the elves and spirits and kill every wrongdoer, that's all. Ryu was stunned and asked what it meant. The plan then struck him as too simple. Lear and Tiamat were equally surprised and amazed. Lear whispered to Ryu that the elder might be joking, and Ryu said he did not think so. Corinne told the elder the plan was excellent, and Volka agreed, saying they could go and kill everyone. Rushing into battle, they were stopped when Roos grabbed both of them by the shoulders and ordered the girls to stand down. He added that it was too reckless. First, how do they find which houses the elves will be in, and why not break into the dealers of prohibited goods immediately? The elf reported that the scouts sent to the kingdom still haven't returned. and Ryu warned that if they attacked the nobles would seek revenge and strike the village. They need to think it over again, but the elf suddenly slammed his fist on the table and said they didn't have that much time. Even now, their kin suffer at the hands of these ruthless people. Enduring this pain, they hope to save them and cannot be kept waiting. The elves began to back the one who had just spoken, and you realized it was hard for them too, which explained their hurry. They want to rescue the elves and spirits as quickly as possible. Ryu purses her lips and says she needs to think it through first. If they attack without a plan, the elves could die and they would waste a lot of time, doing more harm than good. The elder asked what they should do then. Placing a hand over his heart, Ryu tells the elves to leave it to him. Posing as a buyer, he will visit the dealers of prohibited goods, and all the elves are surprised. Ryu says that once he sells, he can get the necessary information and might even be able to buy some outright. The elder asked if that would be too dangerous. Okus said that was all, and he had no idea how much money the young man would need for this. Ryu says they just need to be earned. He expects money from selling materials gathered while hunting in the Great Forest and has a small reserve from sales in the Dwarf Kingdom of about 60 gold coins. Turning to the elder, he asks if there are dangerous monsters in the area because he could earn money from them. The elder says there are, of course, many forest spiders here. They recently appeared in the forest and are now reproducing actively. They've already suffered enough from them. Tiamat reminded the young man not to forget the monsters they had already defeated. Ryu agreed and said there would be no problem. Raising his hand, he announces they are launching a mission to rescue the elves and will do their best. In the deep forest at that moment, a spirit flew up to another, and when the other saw him, it cried out. The spirit turned to the young man and asked where he'd been, saying he'd been looking for him for a long time. Apologizing, he said he wanted to know a little about him. He warned that if the young man ran off like that, he might get into trouble. Then he asked the spirit how it felt. The spirit puts on the mantle, says the king of spirits found him very interesting, and is confident Ryu can help their village. He adds that even though Ryu is a mentor, he is very brave and kind-hearted. Some time ago, the Spirit King met a man to create a world between humans and spirits. The man agreed and suggested they sign a contract to use spirit powers, which can help people in many ways. The spirit asks what advantage they have. The man said he would explain it now. He says that people have now completely forgotten the spirit's blessings and treat them as ordinary workers, and they can change that. Reading the letter, the King of Spirits reflects and realizes he appears to be the only one who still believes it. Later, Ryu killed several spiders and said that should be enough. The elf wondered if anyone would buy them at all. Ryu said they could be used in many ways, for example using the threads to make clothes, and that they could go to the principality now, when an elder suddenly approached Ryu and called him. The elder asked the young man to help their brothers because his daughter was among those abducted. Ryu was surprised and asked whether his daughter was really among them. The elder said many children, parents, and even orphans had been abducted. Still, each one is dear to him, and all the elves bow and ask you and his group to bring them home. The main character agrees. The elder rummages in his pocket and offers the young man something. An elder gives him a package. Ryu asks what kind of letter it is. The elder says the letter is from the King of Spirits, and that the young man should bring it to the principality's ruler. Ryu asks which ruler of the principality the young man means. Ryu asks what is in the letter. The elder replies that Ryu should just hand it over. Ryu agrees, saying he is not sure he will be able to meet him but will try. Yes. The elder thanked Ryu's group. Ryu and his team turn and leave. The elves wish them the Spirit King's blessing. After a while, the girls asked Ryu what kind of principality Eric was. Ryu told Karin he didn't know the details, but things weren't as strict there as in other countries. You don't need a card to enter. Miss Tiamat said this principality had also received the Spirit's blessing. Oka looked surprised and asked if they were really kidnapping elves and spirits to sell. Tiamat said it was most likely someone's plan. Start by gathering information. When selling the spiders to the guild, they should speak with the people. They arrive in the city, and Ryu asks whether this is really the principality of Ifruch, adding that he sees nothing special. Entering the guild, they find it oddly lifeless. The young man pulls out the spiders and says he wants to sell them. They hand him money and ask him to count it. Reo thanked him but felt a sense of déjà vu, then says they have received the money, and suddenly someone calls Reo. It was Mac. The young man said they had not seen each other for a long time. Mac explained he had heard someone was selling rare materials, so he came to look and assumed it was the young man, which surprised Ryu. Oerka asked Ryu whether he really knew the mechanic. Ryu confirmed this, saying they had met in the land of the dwarves. Mac said he could hardly believe he had met Ryu here, because he hadn't expected the young man to come at such a busy time, and Ryu, surprised, asked what stressful time Max meant. Max suggested the young man might not know that the ruler had recently fallen ill. Ryu was very surprised. Matt said that in this country, whoever could sign a contract with the King of Spirits becomes the ruler. Yet no one has been able to sign the contract, leaving people very worried. Reo said everything was clear, and thought about what it meant that the Spirit King and the current ruler were familiar with each other. Perhaps the letter refers to the future recipient. Mac asked what you were doing here, and the young man was surprised, but he decided he could not tell him he had come to save the elves. Ryu replied that at one village's request he was looking for missing people, and Mac was surprised, and said Ryu was very kind. Ryu asks the young man if he has any information and whether he has heard anything about servants in this country. Max says it's not much. He'd heard there was a dark guild in this country dealing in illegal goods called the Black Wolves. The man said he remembered someone from the guild, and Ryu, surprised, asked if that was true. Max said that with Ryu's group showing up, it would be hard to reach him. Ryu looked surprised and asked what Max meant. Max said that dealers and people with prohibited goods are judged by their clothes, so they can easily be mistaken for the poor. Ryu said he understood. NAC replied that once they had expensive clothes, they could go straight to him. There was nothing more he could do. You thanked them. A while later, the man waved at them and said goodbye, and the girls grew worried and asked if everything would be all right. Karin said it was inconvenient. Aureka told the girl it suited her very well. Tiamat told everyone they should act like aristocrats and watch their words and behavior. The heroes wore elegant, expensive clothes. Ryu told the girls that everything was fine and suggested they repeat everything. In the family, Ru is the father, Tiamat is his wife, and Karine and Olteka are their daughters. He intends to say who Lear will be, but the girl screamed loudly and demanded to know why she had to be an animal. Reo said she could not hide her tail in her ears, so it was hard for her to disguise herself as a human. This upset her, and they decided to go to the dealers of prohibited goods. Everyone agreed. After a while, the group was met by the butler, who asked if it was really their first time. Ryu agreed and said his close friend Mac had recommended the place to him. The man said he understood everything. Then the man asked Ryu which servant he was interested in, and Ryu was surprised because he hadn't even considered making a purchase plan. Suddenly, Mrs. Tiamat interrupted them and said he should keep the house tidy and be presentable, and then asked what kind of servants they had. The man said they should be allowed to show all their goods, so he told them to follow him. Ryu turns to Tiamat, who waves her head. They go down a long flight of stairs. Ryu asked the man what kind of servants they keep. He replied they had many servants. A man could not pay his debts. There was also a former adventurer, but overall the man was sure they would be satisfied. Volka whispered that it was disgusting. Ryu told her to be quiet. The band also said they still have half-humans. Ro asked if any were available. The man agreed, saying it was exactly like that, and asked you if he was really interested. He then said he could show them if they wanted. The man asked Ryu what race the man was interested in, maybe dogs or cats, and then Ryu asked whether they had elves, which surprised the man. He stopped and, whispering again to Tiamat, asked if he had really said something wrong. Tiamat said he might be starting to suspect. The man apologized. Man. He said that unfortunately they had no elves, and Ryu was surprised. After a while, they reached the room. The man explains that elves are valuable and are only sold at auction. Ryu said he understood everything, so they could not be found at other merchants either, and the man agreed that it was much more profitable to sell them at auctions. The protagonist realized this was serious. Money and merchants could fix many things, but auctions were different. The richest bidder wins, and the elves would sell for a fortune. He realizes they must find out where they are being held faster. Ryu asks the man where the auction will be held. The man apologizes but says he cannot disclose that information. Ryu sets out a bag of gold coins and asks the man to tell him a little about elves in exchange for a modest gift. The man was very surprised. A man hands over a list of people put up for auction and asks the other man not to share it. There are especially many women and children among them. The Dark Guild has stepped up its efforts recently. He heard they managed to capture a number of elves. Ryu realizes there are so many of them. To free everyone, they must act carefully. Ryu spots Wiro Ray Solon, points at her, and the man says the dear client has a good eye. You realize she will be sold at auction in 3 days, and the headman asks you to save his daughter. Seeing the girl, he realizes they share the same last name, and that she seems to be the elder's daughter. Tiamat whispers to the young man that there is little time left before the auction and they should hurry, and Ryu agreed. Ryu says this means they might find a real treasure soon, then asks what makes elves so valuable. The man says he doesn't even know. Suddenly Ro gives him another bag of coins, and the man agrees to tell Ro everything. In the Dark Guild, they said every elf was followed by a spirit. The elf was seen as a pleasant bonus. Ryu asks about that bonus and wonders what it means. If the man learns the ruler is ill, he asks for you, and now everyone is trying to sign a contract with the spirit, for which they need elves. The spirits usually stay close to the elves. After hearing it all, the main character said he understood. Ryu thinks about the elf's words that even now their brothers and sisters are suffering terribly, and that they asked the young man to help. Watching the man, he thinks the elves' hearts are filled with grief, and that they have launched a spirit hunt, and now treat elves like objects. Ryu was furious, Karine noticed, and said Dad was very angry, and Erika said she felt a bloodlust. The man asked Ryu whether there was anything else he could do to help. Ryu declined and said that would be enough. He asked whether he could find out who was behind it, and the man apologized, saying he did not have that information. Ryu thanked the man for the information, said they thought it was time to go and that next time they would definitely buy a servant from them, and the man thanked them and said he would look forward to their next visit. After a while, Lear said she could not believe elves were being kidnapped just for money. Corinne added it was terrible to see in person. Lear asked Ryu if the young man was okay. Ryu said he was fine. He vowed they would save all the elves. Treating other races like objects makes no sense to him. Lear and Corinne agreed with the young man. Ryu says more information is needed. We must locate where the prisoners are being held and identify who is behind this. Miss Tiamat suggested the children change their clothes because they stood out too much now. Ro agreed with the girl, and they decided to hide the clothes here. After that, the main character says they need to ask more questions, and at the same time he opens a pot on the ground and is stunned by what he finds inside. Inside, a child giggled nervously and greeted Ryu, leaving everyone very surprised. The child said hello to Ryu. Ryu took the pot's lid and closed it. The child screamed and asked the young man what he was doing. The young man apologized and said he did not mean to invade the child's home. The girl said this was not her house and that she was not a child, and introduced herself as Alice, who will be 19 this year and is an informant from the land of the world. Alice also warned the young man not to underestimate her. Ryu said he looked like a child. Reo asked about the Land of Light and said it was his home. Alice was surprised and asked if he was really from there too. Miss Tiamat asked about the Land of Light and whether this country is truly dominated by the church. Oka asked about the church. Rose said this is where they train for their profession, a large organization of priests. Alice said everything was fine, so she came here to serve their hero. Ryu was surprised and asked if they really knew Chikaya, and Alice agreed, saying Chikaya is a member of the heroes who handles intelligence and information gathering, though her squad is a bit different from the main hero group. Because they are from the same city, she asks the young man to help her with a case. Ryu asks what that means. The girl says the trade in banned goods is flourishing in this country and must be stopped. Ryu realizes Alice shares their goal. Alice said she already knows everything about how they came to the city to rescue the servants. Posing as wealthy people, they infiltrated a black market dealer. She can give them a lot of useful information and asks for their opinion and whether they will help free the servants, requesting their answer. Ryu thinks it over, then asks the girl to let him find out why they are. If Alice works in the intelligence group, it is unclear why they do not release the servants themselves. She said she could obtain information easily but could not fight. Having already been turned away when she tried to enter the auction, they threw her out the door. When Ro asked, she decided to ask Poff for help. Alice agreed and said excessive spirit hunting is a serious problem. People use elemental magic because long ago they signed a contract with the King of Spirits, who granted them the magic. After an outburst like that, he can end the fight. They might then lose their magic and have to face the monsters alone. Ryu thinks the hero might lose his powers too. Alice rushes to Ro and begs him, promising to repay him. She insists she must finish the mission, because if he fails, he cannot face the hero. Ru agreed and said they would help. Lear said the hero hates monsters, and it's okay that they will help. Ryu realizes it's better not to approach the hero yet, but they could use information, so he invites Lear to talk. Alice seems to be in a different squad from the hero, and her information might help them avoid the hero's attention. Tiamat said this would be better, and says that means everything is decided. Ryu says they will help, but in return the girl will give the information they want. Alice asked whether that was true, thanked the young man, and said she would contact the squad. The girl fell silent. Karen asked what she was doing. Ryu said it was a magical artifact that works much like their connection. Alice says she has received permission, asks them to talk in the room, and the girl calls everyone to follow her. She stumbles and falls. Ryu doubts she's really from the scouting squad. After a while they came back, and Alice told the captain she had returned, and he said they had been waiting for them. Another group met the Ryu's group. The man thanked the other group for helping Alice.